PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
Oh my god, it's numbers. What year is it, Paul?
What year is it?
I feel like Robin Williams and Jumanji right now. Because
we are that meme.
We are that meme because there's a new Scream movie out, and it's aptly titled just Scream. Even though it's Scream 5, even though it's a sequel, even though it's also kind of a reboot, it's a legacy sequel or a requel, whatever what you want to call it. It's got all these names. So it's not 1996 though, it's 2022, and there's a Scream movie out.
Very, very exciting news. I will say we did, if you listened to our podcast last week where we went through Scream 1 through 4, we actually had a rant about the Scream 5 titling, well, it should be Scream 5, et cetera, et cetera. I gotta say that, like, this... Oh, we have an echo, by the way. There's an echo somewhere.
There's an echo?
There was an echo. All right, it's gone now.
I think you're just hearing that down.
I could be just hearing something. Maybe I'll...
I think you just leave that in. Don't worry about it.
I'll leave it out. We're gonna edit this out.
I want people to think that we're this terribly unprofessional all the time because we're two mediocre white dudes.
We are two mediocre. I haven't even got to the announcement yet. I'm getting there. All right. So anyway, boom. We talked about it. We had a rant about it, about this whole Scream titling thing. And however, after watching it for the first time, I feel like it was actually apt to be called just Scream. I'm okay with this particular film using that quote unquote lazy artifice because it made sense because it actually was making a whole comment on the whole thing in and of itself. Meta upon meta upon meta.
No, it should have been called Scream 5, and that's fine. that's just what it is. And that's, you know, I actually really don't care ultimately. Even though I ranted and raved about it, it fit the movie, and I'm not gonna blame anyone at Spyglass or the Radio Silence guys. I mean, I might blame them. Or maybe I'll just blame Spyglass. I don't know whose idea it was. But it ultimately worked, so it doesn't really matter. So everything I'm saying and ranting or raving about or did in the past, it's all good. You know why? Because the movie's actually good. And it's so good, in fact, that this weekend that it opened, it is already worldwide made $48 million. It is made 35 alone in the U.S., which is $4 million less than Scream 4 did in all of 2011, which makes me wonder, where the fuck were all of you in 2011?
At home.
Apparently, I don't understand, because I'm glad you guys all showed up for this one, because the movie's great, and I can't wait to talk about it. But my God, where were you in 2011 when it was still Wes Craven, when we could have had a 5 and 6 with Wes and Kevin Williamson? Where were you guys? Some of you may not have been born, and I guess that's true.
That is true. But you know who you can't blame?
Who?
Two mediocre white guys on film. And that's
right, because we saw it in theaters.
We saw it in theaters.
I saw it in theaters at least 3 times. One of those I was really drunk, but I did see it.
Maybe you can blame one mediocre white guy, because I don't know if I did see it in theaters or not. I have to go back and think. I think I did. Either way,
you're a mediocre white man. You don't think, but that's beside the point.
That's true. That's true. I'm PLD. That's PJ Campbell.
We
are two mediocre white dudes. We are on talking about film because we all need more mediocre white guy takes on film, as we all know in this community, in this sphere.
Yes.
So let's get into this. I want to say I talked about this before we even get too far into it. I'm not a movie critic for life. I haven't done that. Like, I've done my own letterbox thing. I write up reviews here and there. But for Scream 1 through 4 for our podcast, I'd sit down, bucket of popcorn, have a notebook out, taking detailed notes of what we're going to talk about. I don't know how movie theater critics do it. Like, they bring the whole lighted pen and notebooks and stuff into the theaters while they watch them. I couldn't do that. So I had to sit down with a bucket of popcorn and just sat back and watch the movie, even though part of my head's going, all right, I got to take these mental notes so that I can talk about this at the podcast. But I feel like we're going to have a little more of a free-form show, because this is not a revisit. This is not our 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th time watching this movie. I'm watching this on one viewing. How many times have you watched the movie now?
I've only seen it once. Unfortunately, I've not had the time to go and see it again, as much as I'd like to. This wasn't for God, this is going to sound so bad. And if anyone shares this with the people who made this movie, I don't want to come off like a jackass about it. I love Scream, obviously, but No Way Home is the first movie that I saw multiple times in theaters since the pandemic started, because I just love the movie so much that I saw it so many times its opening weekend. Also, I saw Ghostbusters Afterlife twice in its opening weekend, but that's because I took my dad to see it because my dad loves Ghostbusters. So I digress. This is basically me saying I really want to see Scream. I'm probably going to go this week. It's my birthday week. I'm going to probably take myself to the movies again because I deserve that. I deserve a nice date. So I'm going to take myself to the movies, get a big bucket of popcorn, and watch another audience scream and shout and giggle their way through another Ghostface movie.
Which is your right and your desire. And I actually would like to do it again as well. I might try to find an excuse. Spider-Man I saw more than once because I had a son who wanted to watch it.
I was going to say, you have a family, though, that you have to care for. I have corgis and cats, and I feed them, and they love me. The family thing doesn't like the idea of, doesn't like a lot of horror movies. My wife hates horror movies. I got my mom to come to this one. I got to give credit where credit's due. I got my mom to come out because she likes the Scream movies, so that was kind of fun. Go. So we did
actually. I'll say a little bit behind the scenes there. I know PJ actually sent a great meeting of him trying to explain the Scream franchise to his parents.
No, to my dad specifically.
Your dad.
So this is like a total tangent off the rails thing, and probably something no one needs to know other than the people in my life. But that's just fine. We're on the internet, and I'm going to tell you guys anyway. My parents live not very far from me, so every other week or so, a couple times a month, I'll either go to their place or they come to my place, and like I make dinner and we watch a movie that they've never seen. And that's kind of like a thing that we've been doing ever since I moved to Arizona, and it's been really great, and it's really fun, and I like spending time with them. And so they were over, and my dad was, we're just chit-chatting over dinner after I'd cooked, and he started asking me about Scream, and he was like, so explain to me the Ghostface killer. And I was like, oh God, here we go. Cause I know that he doesn't like scary movies. So he has no idea that Ghostface is already going to be me having to explain that it's always different in every movie. And it opened this whole can of worms between myself and my mom and Rachel Silvestrini, who's been visiting me, which has been really fun. And we're like trying to explain it to him. And I think I got to the point where I was like, honestly, the way you have to look at it is, what if someone made a live action Scooby-Doo movie that was rated R with lots of blood?
And it was the best description I had heard in a long time.
It's 100% accurate.
Absolutely 100% accurate. I love for it.
Yeah. So. I look, I'm taking full credit for that. I wish they should put that on the box.
Oh, Matthew Lillard is Shaggy.
I know.
That makes actually even more sense.
I know.
Of course, he's a demonic Shaggy in a way, I guess. But
well, I mean,
that's not the
that's fine. I kind of wish that Freddie Prinze Jr. was in this, because Sarah Michelle Gellar's in the second one.
That's true. We got to have the whole gang there eventually. That would be cool. There's still time though, because we think there's going to be a Scream 6 announced. There could be a Scream 6 by the time you're hearing this podcast.
Like announced, not out for you to watch, because they've not made it yet. But
we're recording this 2 days prior, so you're not. It's not going to happen.
I would be shocked if in the next couple of weeks we don't hear that Matt Batelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. I really hope I said Mr. Batelli-Olpin's name correctly, but
we'll go with it.
I hope it was right. But I would be shocked if them and the writers behind the film, like Vanderbilt and William Shattuck, I would not be shocked if they were back in some capacity at least. I think Kevin Williamson will definitely exec produce all the way through these. And we'll get into what I think where the series goes next, probably towards the end, because I don't want to get into it early.
Right.
But I think
we might even opine on where it could have gone if we had stayed in the Wes Craven universe, so to speak, that we didn't get.
Well, I think ultimately some of that stuff can actually come back.
Yeah. That's true.
Which we'll get into. Just in general, I mean, it would have changed the ending though for ultimately also if they had gone the way that we had talked about last week with Jill surviving and things like that, which is a totally different thing, but it could have happened.
Absolutely could have happened.
I digress.
But you know what? Let's get into it. Let's get right into it at this point. We start Scream 6. Scream 6. I'm already jumping to Scream 6. Scream 5, we jump into it. 2021, 25 years after Loomis and Mocker terrorizing Woodsboro, we have our new beginning. And we begin...
Or is it an old beginning?
or is it an old beginning? And that is right away we are treated to what the film does best. This whole requel idea, which I have been calling a reboot sequel thing. I've been trying to find a different way. I guess requel is probably the best way you can really put it.
Requels, I feel like the best
it's catchy
case scenario.
I didn't really think of it that way. I was trying to go for the long, funny one, but it didn't work. It just, you can't roll off a tongue like requel. But it does a requel. It's probably one of the best examples of a requel I've seen, in that it does pay homage to the original. It does do what you want. It does check off the checklist that you want. It's got new characters who are good. Yep. It's got old legacy characters who have their moments. It does share a lot of similar beats to the very original one that made it famous in the first place, giving you that sense of familiarity. But it does also kind of add to it in a way that lets it breathe on its own. And of course, I want to posit real quick, and we don't have to linger on it. I think a requel is best judged after the sequel to the requel to see where it goes from there, where it jumps on its own, and if it can stand on its own 2 feet. And so that's what we're going to find out.
I don't disagree with that at all. It's actually interesting you bring that up, because we've seen that time and again of like this idea when we do the requel of sorts. Like Jurassic World starts with all of its own new characters, other than like a legacy character who is more of a blink and you'll miss it. You may not even realize it's a character from the original Jurassic Park, to be honest with you.
Right.
Only to like vaguely bring back a character in its sequel. Right. So they managed to show that they could still stand on its own. Like, people, don't get me wrong, am I super excited for Dominion because it's got all the characters from the first movie coming back that are still alive? Yes. But I also realize that when it comes to Jurassic Park and Jurassic World as a series, I'm really there for the dinosaurs and the kills. Yeah. So, I mean, post the first one's a masterpiece of its own, but like the law of diminishing returns is I really just want to see dinos wrecking shop, and that's the movie I'm here for. Scream is kind of in that boat in a way, but I think that they've set themselves up on at least firm enough ground that I want to see where that's going to go. So we're in a good place, is all I'm kind of saying at this point. There's a lot of good ground to be made, and I think you're right, because now it's going to be, how does the movie hold up on its next installment? Because truth of the matter is, this is a great launch pad for the future of the franchise, but it also is such a warm love letter to the original, and kind of, mostly the original, but almost everything that's come before it also, to the point that it feels like a good finale.
Right.
Which is kind of funny because, in a way, The Force Awakens was like the exact opposite of that. It was clearly a love letter to A New Hope, but it was only a launch pad. It didn't feel like a finale in any sort of regard. But Scream feels like you can end it very easily here.
I kind of feel like that was done purposely, because like, they weren't sure how it was going to be. Because after Scream 4 came out, we had a similar situation where it came out, they dipped their toes in the water, and not that it wasn't well received, but it didn't set the world on fire. I'm calling
out everyone who decided not to go see Scream 4. It's fine. Y'all failed the film, and that's okay.
You have failed this franchise.
It looks like, y'all woke up and decided to come out to this one. I'm happy to see it. I think this movie deserves all the love, but also, how dare you? That's all I'm getting at. Just how dare you?
But there we are, and bringing it back full circle back to the opening, is the opening was exactly that. It was a very similar sequence to the Drew Barrymore scene, pretty much, and
with Jenna Ortega.
And that right there was a new thing. It was like, well, okay, well, it's not someone extremely famous. This is not like a character like who's going to be in there for 30 seconds just for the famous kill. So all of a sudden, we're doing a little something different, even if beat for beat seems familiar. We have horror trivia. We have talking to other people like online. He's talking to her friend or whatever, Amber, as it turns out to be. And we got the great horror trivia is like, it's definitely present right away. And it's like even more, worse is not the right word, but it's even more on the head than the original with Drew Barrymore. Also, we're throwing in there Babadook, we're throwing in there all these films of the modern times. But the best part about it is they introduce Stab as one of those horror icon franchises in this universe.
Which we know, obviously.
Right. But the meta-ness of that made me smile right away.
Totally.
Like, oh, okay.
Also, I want to say, one of the things that makes me laugh the most about this is like a situation in the way we're talking about it, is that in the last movie, there was 7 stab films. At this point, there's only 8. So in a way, it's also like the 7th one didn't do well enough for people to keep going. And then they waited. And then they're like, we're going to reboot it and change it and do something different. And the fuck of it is that it's Rian Johnson who directed it within the universe, which
this whole thing is a love letter.
And it's the 8th
Jedi.
movie. Yeah. I was like, man, y'all are like on the nose about what they're referencing. And I thought that was really great. And it is not lost on me that a lot of the people I see melting down online that are being called out are missing literally what the movie is talking about and what it's saying about how you act towards people. So I just loved that they took that as a swing and did just that, because it just made my heart so happy.
Subtlety, thy name is not Scream.
Never has been. I saw people on the internet trying to claim that Scream has never been meta before this, and I did not understand.
Ooh, how? How can you claim this? Like, the whole thing's based on meta.
People are not very bright.
I'm not going to get angry.
I got nothing on that. I have no reason other than to say, y'all are fools if you think that.
So you have the opening sequence. It's very similar, but there's one big thing that happens at that, and it's that she survives that opening sequence.
I also want to bring up, dude, how quickly that these Radio Silence guys, who I've been a fan of because I really love Ready or Not. I thought Ready or Not was so much fun,
yes.
But they also had done segments in VHS, and I really liked the first couple VHS movies, and it was so fun seeing them get to do this because they so clearly love Ghostface, and
yes.
Off the bat in this sequence, they had Ghostface like fall down and trip, and I was like, oh my god, they get it, because Ghostface is the most clumsy villain of all time. And I love that they really leaned in on how clumsy can Ghostface be, and it made me so goddamn happy.
I always wanted to do at some point, and this is throwing it out there now, too late to do it right this second, but like a top 5 clumsy Ghostface moments.
Oh yeah,
where he just flips and slides, because it'd be fun. It's fun as hell to do.
I've been seeing a lot of people bringing that up lately, and I'd be remiss because we really didn't talk about clumsy Ghostface a lot while we were talking about all this. But that's one of the things that's always stood out to me about Ghostface is how many times he's like tripped or fallen or whatever it may be. Yeah, just Ghostface is so clumsy all the time. And I loved, and I knew we were in good hands the moment that happened, because it's such a specific thing that if Ghostface feels good at what Ghostface does, there's a problem.
Yeah,
because Ghostface should not be. The people doing this are not like trained killers. They're normal people who have decided that they want to do something totally crazy and psychotic.
This is the big difference between like Ghostface versus a Freddy, Michael, or Jason, who are like the
right.
These are just kids or high schoolers or whoever.
Or a suburban mom.
Or a suburban mom, for example. Exactly. Although I gotta say, it's already had one of my favorite moments in the franchise, and it wasn't even a death moment. That ankle stomp, that was savage.
Oh, dude. This whole movie is savage. Yeah. This is the most violent Scream movie by quite a bit. The original was the most violent until the 4th, and then from the 4th to this, there was an escalation again. There's a part of that is because of where we are. There's no doubt in my mind the times have changed, and so the escalation in horror has changed with it. But I'll say this too: it escalated, but they also didn't go out of their way to make it grotesque. I think they really avoided going full like torture porn with it. It was not as hard as, say, the zombie Halloweens, which are savage, but they're dark and they feel... I've said this before. Zombie was the perfect dude to do a Texas Chainsaw movie. Him doing Halloween, like, I'm glad he did it because he wanted to, but like he was so much more made to do like a Texas Chainsaw because his movies are very grindhouse and dirty and like savagely so.
Yep, 100%.
So I was glad to see that this movie found a balance of the escalation of where we are in our entertainment's violence, especially in the horror space, while also not going so far that it now suddenly felt super out of place, because there has to be some sort of grounded reality to what's happening in these situations, because Ghostface is a human. Ghostface is not a supernatural being.
Right.
So
And it's a balance that they find. That's balance has always been key in Scream. The balance between gore and
comedy,
horror, the balance between horror and comedy. Everything else. And Scream finds its mark pretty well. Much better than say Scream 3.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like there's a reason that many people, not all, I've seen quite a few people defending Scream 3. There's a lot of people who like that movie.
Yeah, a lot of people reevaluated it, and I'm like, okay.
But I think there's a reason that a lot of these movies are ultimately looked like these ones stand out, and why 3 is commonly looked down upon.
Correct.
And is because that movie doesn't find its balance. It doesn't do
it's
what
partially
it should.
Production. It's partially because of the time it was made, etc.
Yeah,
et cetera.
there's a lot, and I'm never gonna I still like the movie. I don't ever want anyone to come across that I'm not one of the people who's like, man, this movie tarnishes the franchise and ruins anything. It's not that. It's just of the 3 originals and now of the 5 overall, it is still easily the least film.
Right. And we'll find that out. That's a spoiler for the end. When we come back to the end, we're going to come back and rank everything and make sure we have everything in the right place. But either way, go back to the actual film itself. We had the moment, because I brought this up because she survives the beginning of the film. And I remember thinking to myself, when it comes to this, like I told her this yesterday, or when I talked to you briefly about it, I didn't like that at first. And I realized that I felt I was basically being very overprotective of it. I'm one of those fans that I don't like sometimes. Now the difference between me and some of those fans is that some of those fans that are out there will hold on to that and just they don't let it evolve or let the film take you. I had the initial thought of, ooh, I don't like that. That changes my Scream. That's not my hashtag, not my Scream, so to speak. But it ended up being the best thing because, we're going to go, obviously we're going to full spoilers. By the end, Ortega was honestly the best red herring of the entire movie, of the potential. She's the one that actually made the most sense to me of being who a killer could be when we were trying to figure out who done it. Or a mastermind behind the whole thing. And it's because she survived the first part. Mm-hmm. Because also that gave it reason, okay, she survived it because she had to. And that's how they get Sam back. That's how and I'm going to throw it right there. Ortega's performance is probably one of my favorites in the film. She is brilliant, and I can't wait to see more of her.
And it's so funny because I totally forgot until the reviews started to come out that she was even in the movie. And I don't mean that as a dig. It was more that my focus was for me, I know Jack Quaid and I know Melissa Barrera, and I was excited for Dylan Minnette, and I was excited to see the OG cast. So that was my focus, because the truth is Jenna Ortega is not an actress that I've been following, but she's an entire another generation's. And my mom brought it up, actually, which made me laugh. She was like, we were on the drive home and she was on IMDb, and she realized that she knew Jenna Ortega because she used to babysit kids that watched a show on Disney Channel. So there's an entire Disney Channel audience that are seeing Jenna Ortega do something like this.
Ah, all right.
Yeah. So it's just kind of funny to me that she's so good, and it just goes to show how talented she is. Yes. That she was able to pop through from something, I guess it was a show called Stuck in the Middle. Right. And she played it as it was a Disney Channel show. And for her to launch herself into something like this, it's totally new world, totally new realm. And I guess that's kind of the joke about me being where were you in 2011? I guess it's not so much of a joke. There's a lot of these kids who grew up watching her who were probably about 10 years old.
It's true. That's a good point.
And here she is now, front and center of a Scream movie, and she's fantastic.
Fantastic. Let's get into that next person, because the next part we talk about is we're introduced to Samantha Carpenter, who is her sister, her older sister, and Richie Kirsch, as played by, we said, the aforementioned Jack Quaid, and Samantha was played by Melissa
Barrera.
Melissa Barrera, that's true. I gotta say,
yes, it is true. That is her name, Paul.
That's her name. That is very much her name. I didn't know much about her, to be honest. I know I saw her in the Heights, and of things, but I wasn't, honestly. I'll throw it out there right now. I was not that impressed with her. She played it pretty flat throughout the whole movie. I kind of feel like and part of that is the leading character's role. Like it's that's the through line you get, while the other characters get to be more colorful and sparkly around you in a way. But she didn't do much for me. I mean, if I saw her again, I wouldn't like be mad. But like, it's not someone I was excited to see. But Jack Quaid, on the other hand, God, I thought he was no perfect. He fits this franchise like a glove.
I think people have been so hard on Melissa Barrera. Like, this is her second major performance in a American film. And not only that, I thought she was super great in The Heights, so I was very excited to see her in this. And I really like her performance in this movie because it's very, very cold. It's calculated. It's haunted. There's a reason for that. Her performance feels like someone who is not sure how to interact and deal with people. And that's what I like so much about her in it, is that she feels like someone who has disconnected herself from the world after finding out that her dad was Billy.
Boy, there. Billy Loomis.
Yeah, Billy Loomis, who is played by the great Skeet Ulrich. And he is back. This is some of the best de-aging I've ever seen in a movie. Number one.
Yeah, I totally bought it. Didn't even think about it. I barely thought about it. Like, oh, wow, he's definitely not that young still. But okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll be honest. I watched Riverdale for a little bit while I think it's still on. I don't watch it anymore. But when he was on it, he's much older now because people age. Guess that. I know the internet doesn't believe it, but people do age. So it's funny to see this and how great he looked. Just, it was incredible. It could have been makeup too. I think it's more the de-aging stuff. If it ended up, well, I'm sure we'll find out. They've been very quiet. They don't obviously want to spoil this on social media that he has come back. So we haven't gotten any real behind the scenes conversations about that situation yet. So I'm very excited about that. But to bring it around, I thought Barrera was really great. And that's why, because I think that her performance is someone who's very haunted and very unsure of her place. And I think that's the performance she gives. And that performance may not work for everyone, and that's totally fine. Just don't come for people. I think when people make it personal, it's really stupid, which is really what this movie is about. But I really liked her, and I thought her and Quaid had really great chemistry, and Quaid is the standout in this movie outside of Jenna Ortega and Barrera for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let me just say real quick, I do know I kind of been avoiding. I avoid a lot of the outlier stuff and like the person and stuff, and I never would take anything personal. I don't think she's bad in any way. I just want to know that. I just want to know that I don't think she's bad. She doesn't ruin the movie for me at all. It's just not. It is not a performance that really struck the right chords with me per se. Especially compared to like Jenna Ortega and Jack Quaid this one. But Jack Quaid is spot on exactly. Like I feel like he feels like he's always been a part of the franchise.
Are you ready for a rant? By the way,
go ahead.
I agree with you about the Quaidness of it all, but I have a rant now.
Go ahead.
I've been sitting on this rant. I'm very excited about this, or not. I don't really know how to say it. This movie did something that I wanted The Rise of Skywalker to do so badly that I left Scream loving Scream, and it made me like The Rise of Skywalker less than I already did. And I'm someone who will be an apologist for that movie till the end of time, probably, because, you know, space wizards, laser swords, pew pew pew. Like, I'm really, when it comes to Star Wars, I'm not really hard to please. But at the end of The Last Jedi, they set up this whole thing where Luke does the astral projection and he goes against Kylo on Crate, and it's fucking awesome and cool and amazing. And it ends with "See you around, kid." All I wanted through Rise of Skywalker was Kylo to be haunted by Luke Skywalker. That is all I wanted the entire movie. They didn't give us that. But this movie, no problem. Billy Loomis is back and he's fucking haunting his daughter, Sam, the entire time.
I had a similar experience in my head because in my mind, you wanted Luke, and I get that. I wanted Anakin. I wanted the whole thing like to be, because the whole thing set up. I think we're going to a Star Wars right here. Again, I'm someone who loved the whole sequel trilogies. The original trilogy is my thing. I love Star Wars.
I love Star Wars.
So I don't care. Like, you're not going to come from me either way. But what I had wanted at one point was, we got the Han Solo ghost sequence in a way. I wanted that to have been Anakin. Because I had the whole idea in my mind that, like, Kylo, if anyone's going to turn Kylo back to the good side, I wanted Anakin to have that line and sit there, have a conversation with him and go, "Yeah, you've been following my footsteps the whole time. where did my footsteps lead? Back to the light. It would have been this like great like moment where like you would actually literally follow his footsteps back to the light. I wanted the whole time having Anakin be there to be the journey. I digress. We'll do. I think at some point it is inevitable that we're going to do a Star Wars run through at some point because that's just what we do.
I hate you so much because I fear the future when we talk about it.
But that's okay. We can handle it.
But I'm serious, man. The radio silence guys made me dislike The Rise of Skywalker more. And I hope that if they ever hear this, they're like, we screwed up someone else's feelings for another movie. No. This has nothing to do ultimately with you guys. What you did was great.
Yes.
It's the fact that Rise of Skywalker really should have capitalized on it, and it drives me nuts that it didn't, because it was right there. It was right there in the storytelling, and yet Scream managed to do it with a character who's been dead for 25 years. Like, how is this possible? How did they manage to do something so freaking cool and well done? And I like this. The whole Billy Loomis thing works for me. Like, I've seen that there's been divisive talk about this. I love this scene. I love this sequence. I love every scene he's in because I think it works. I think he's used sparingly enough that it doesn't overtake the movie.
Exactly.
You could have just as easily done that. You could have just as easily done that with The Rise of Skywalker, and you didn't. And I don't understand it. Why did they not do that?
Breathe. Whew.
Oh man,
breathe. You're getting a little heated. I get it.
No, I'm passionate. I'm passionate.
I get it. I hear it. Yeah. I love it. That's the one you'd have a stroke on air. So
I think most people probably don't want me to have a stroke on air, but that stranger things have happened.
I will say that I love the aspect of it. The best part about it is if this is pitched, it's like if it's done cheesily, the idea would be that Skeet Ulrich Billy Loomis is like pitching her to be a bad guy and pitching her to try to get like it'd be like the cheesy thing is to get her to go to the dark side, come join your father, do this whole thing like that, and they decide early on to not do that. Billy Loomis isn't like a saint in any way. This thing, he's still a killer, he's still a psychotic killer, but it's like. He's a part of her in a way, but she's still good enough that when she gets that memory of him, that vision of him, whatever, it's basically, how do I survive this? What do I do in this situation? What's going to get me out of this? And he helps the daughter away. It doesn't make Billy Loomis any more good, quote unquote. I mean, not like good like a good character, like a good guy, but it works in the story itself.
I'll say this,
lets you say it.
And I'll jump ahead to the end. And we'll eventually come back around to it. But I think that the brilliant thing is that the whole time he really is kind of pestering her to be like, why are you running from your past? Why are you running from your history? Embrace it. Like, he kind of is doing like the join the dark side thing, but it ultimately becomes not necessarily join the dark side, but like, look, I had my own like anger and rage. Use it ultimately to save your sister and put this to bed. Like, that's what it became, which I thought was so great and so different. And it could have gone literally any other way. And it didn't. And so that's why it worked for me, because it felt like a very concise reading of make it that he's haunting her and she's running from it so hard until she realizes, wait, there's a part of this that could work.
And that's what the best part about it is, because this is not a supernatural thing. Scream has always very much been not supernatural. This is not Billy Loomis.
No, it's her thoughts.
It's her thoughts. It's her own delusions or whatever, maybe possibly hallucinations or whatever it is. But it all comes from her subconscious. Whereas, like, I mean, just like Scream 4, how we did have the ghost sequences in the past where Sydney dreamed of her mother.
Oh, that's
like
3.
That, everything else. In 3. Sorry, I said 4, but in 3. But like, they have supernatural moments, but that's as supernatural as it ever got. This has always been grounded in a hyper reality. Let's be honest, a hyper reality. You figure out how much time Sidney Prescott has lived through these kind of things, and how many times can Sidney Prescott be involved in mass murders?
As it turns out, 5 times.
5 times so far. So, but with that in mind. So the fact that this is not really Billy Loomis, this is her own fears of who she could be, but realizing that she has her path that she has to accept, move on, and still be the person she knows.
The Sam Carpenter she's become.
Right, exactly. The Sam Carpenter she's become.
Also,
so that's what it is.
What are the odds that after, like, they had to have been working on the script and the everything for Scream going into like 2020, right?
Right.
They had to have been already doing all that because that's about the time they're getting the cast and stuff. Even Rise of Skywalker with the Rey stuff becomes kind of this movie in a way.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
It is a little weird.
And I almost wonder if that's also like a meta commentary on what they did, or if that is just like very random happenstance. Because
I understand it's not, because I feel like they're Star Wars fans. I feel like
I think they are too.
They comment on it so heavily with the Rian Johnson Star Wars thing that they obviously say it in the rules and everything else and the requel stuff. I think you can't deny it. I mean, who's not a Star Wars fan, really?
No, right. But isn't that interesting?
It is very
I just think it's funny because I already had like very specific feelings about what they did tied to Rise of Skywalker, only to also go, they kind of Rise of Skywalker themselves.
Right.
But in a way that it works for me.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that if I just said all that, there's going to be people who listen to this and they're going to go, man, this is some of my problems with it. No wonder I didn't like the movie. And I can see that too. I can.
Yeah.
I get why there's going to be people who don't dig the movie. But for me, when the truth is I'm a person who I try to leave expectations at the door. I always get excited about something, but once I'm in the theater, it's not about what I wanted. It's about ultimately what the movie gave me. And that's always the thing that I preach. It's a conversation you and I have had plenty of times, is that at the end of the day, when I'm sitting in the theater and I realize a movie may not be doing the thing that I thought it was going to do, that's okay. Because ultimately, as long as it works story-wise and makes sense to me, I can go with the movie on the journey it's taking me on. And I think that fandom and stuff has forgotten that it's okay to just take the journey. Like, it's more about what's presented to you, not about and not being mad that you didn't get what you wanted. You can not like what you were given, but it shouldn't have to do with it wasn't because it was the thing I wanted.
100%, I agree with you. You saw, and then that's kind of what I meant before when I saw the opening sequence at the end. When I saw the end of when she lived the opening sequence, I had that gut reaction of, oh, it's not Scream, but like it. You got to be able to just deep breath, move on. All right, let's see where they're taking us with it, and then see. And you don't have, and sometimes that journey at the end of the day might lead you to a place where, like, you know what? No, I still didn't like what they did in the beginning.
No,
I don't like what they did.
Right,
and that's okay.
That's totally fine. Look, there's plenty of that when it comes to, say, like X-Men 3. I don't like that movie at all. I think it's pretty much garbage. And it has nothing to do with my expectations coming off of X2 when it came out. No, it has everything to do with the execution of that movie is just not good. And that's kind of where I'm at, like with Scream 3. It has nothing to do ultimately with that it didn't do what I wanted Scream 3 to do in my thoughts overall on the movie. It's that I just don't think that the movie earns the stuff it's trying to do. I just think the storytelling in Scream 3, comparative to some of the others, is just not as good. And that's okay. It's still fun to watch. But
absolutely,
I'm never going to blame a movie for not being the movie that I wanted it to be.
100% agreed on that. I like where your head's at on that.
Thanks. I'm glad that we could tangent on this, and we barely even made it to
we passed the first scene. That's about it. Just barely.
That's fine. Look,
40 minutes in, we're past the first scene.
that's pretty much on par for what I expect from this show. So we end up meeting Jack Quaid and Melissa Barrera, as you said. Sam and Richie, they're up in Modesto, California. Shout out to the Northern California, Central California area, not too far from where I grew up. And she, that's when you can already start to see she's like this damaged individual. She's been on the run. She gets a phone call that her sister was attacked and she needs to come home to Woodsboro.
Phone call from Wes.
Yes. Wes Hicks, the aptly named Wes. Yes. Just like the actually last named Sam Carpenter.
Yep. No, that famous director that Tatum mentioned in Scream 1.
Right. 100%. Carpenter. Just like, Skeet Ulrich's last name was Loomis. It's not lost on me. So
this film is chock full of Easter eggs. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And we're going to get to one of them eventually. But
at least
eventually. I love this idea that there's a disconnect, because again, the difference being is that when we meet Sydney in the original, she has her own disconnect. She's gone through her own thing, but she still has a boyfriend. She's still living a life. It's not necessarily a great life. It seems like she's shut herself away from the world, but she's still trying to be human.
Right.
it is very clear that Samantha has not been. She's just been on the run, trying to get as far away from it as possible, protecting her sister, protecting everyone around her because she's afraid of whatever's inside of her. And I kind of like that dynamic. And they, she tells Richie she has to go home. Richie says, well, I'm going to go with you. And she's like, no, you don't have to. And he really is like, no, I want to go with you. And that's where we end up, back in Woodsboro.
And we meet our new group of people, our new group of friends that this movie's going to be based around. We have, obviously, we meet the aforementioned Wes. We meet Amber, Chad Meeks Martin, Mindy Meeks Martin. Love that name. And Liv McKenzie.
The Meeks, man.
The Meeks. So happy to have them in there. I'm going to throw it out there. This group of people is definitely much more reminiscent of Scream 4 than Scream 2 and Scream 3, which you mentioned. Scream 2 and Scream 3 had much more of a flimsy cast that we never really got to know very well, so deaths didn't mean much. That was part of the problems with Scream 2 and 3 that we had. This was a group of kids who I like some of them more than others. Yeah. Obviously. Overall, I think Wes was really well drawn out. He had a great arc for himself. Amber, obviously, as we get to, perfectly cast, perfectly done, perfectly performed. I loved Amber in this. Amber's one of my favorite parts of the whole thing. Liv is fine. Liv is every group is going to have that kind of like non-entity. And I'm sorry, Liv, you're kind of the non-entity overall. There's only so much. There's only so much room in a story.
And there's only so much screen time when you're dealing with this many characters plus the legacy characters. I mean, there's a lot happening in this movie.
But let's throw out there the twins. Chad is great. Chad is fine. But it's Mindy who steals the show for me. Mindy is probably my favorite character. Probably my favorite new character.
Jasmine Brown is one of the coolest actors I have ever seen.
Knocks it out of the park.
So good as the new Randy replacement. And I shouldn't say replacement because she's her own character, but it's the fact that she is the rules character. Yeah. She is the character that is put front and center. She gave a speech so good that felt like it was aimed directly at me, that my entire soul shook while watching it.
I smiled, and she's not as geeky as Randy was, and that's actually okay in a way, because honestly speaking, in the times we are, geeks are kind of like the new cool to a degree.
That's how she feels.
And that's how she feels to me. It feels like she's more that character. Like if she would have done 1998, it would have been much more geeky. Here, she would have been much more of an outcast. Here, she's just kind of like this sarcastic, smart, intelligent, cool person you want to hang out with. And
you know what's funny? You bring that up, and it reminds me of all the people complaining about Andrew Garfield in the original Amazing Spider-Man. And I'm like, that is the whole point of that movie. Like, geeks are cool now, guys. I don't know how to tell you that. Like, geeks are cool. We took over the world. I don't know how to help you. I used to get put in lockers. It's fine. Like, we have come a long way.
I digress. I still don't necessarily agree with that. But we'll talk about that Spider-Man stuff in another Spider-Man watch, which we'll do. I keep promising as well. Every time we go to
you need to stop promising stuff, because
we're already filmed out to like 2035.
You're going to be lucky if I don't make it to the end of this podcast without stroking out, as it turns out. So,
but anyway, yeah, I do like her. I think that she is the best of the new characters. She serves Randy as a Randy fanatic. We're both Randy fanatics. Our favorite character in the franchise.
Yes,
she is the first one that has kind of filled the void to be like, okay, she's still not quite Randy, but like the best we're gonna get at this point, and I want to see more of her. That's nothing you can say about a character means more than I want to see more of her, and I hope that she continues on and
I mean, and beyond. Spoiler alert: she lives.
She does.
The Meekses live on. So,
which is funny. I almost missed that he lived, because I kind of like he got wrecked shop at the end, but then like you see her like saying.
You know what's funny about that?
Ambulance. Is that him? Okay, it is him. Okay, I think.
You know what's really funny about that is I feel like, and I'm just going to jump into this real quick, and it was my favorite Easter egg in the movie, is that we learn via the YouTube videos in the film that are suggested, Kirby lived. Kirby survived after Scream 4, which is a thing that we talked about a ton in our last episode, is like the idea that Kirby may have lived and what could that have meant, and we were always hoping that she had lived. So the movie confirming it means that out there, Kirby is still alive. And I loved that. And so in this, it felt like a reference back to that of we saw a character get savaged so hard that there's no way that they probably lived, but they did.
Well, it's also, I mean, let's be honest, it's also a throwback to the Deweys of Scream 1 through 4.
Oh, no, it totally is.
well.
But I just, it was a nice correlation to the two for me also.
It was. He was
I
fine. He didn't have as much of a character as she did, obviously. He was the more jockier side, and he was good, but like, I just wanted to highlight her specifically.
That is also, I want to bring up Mason Gooding. That is Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. Chad is Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son.
Okay.
There's a little bit of that, obviously, the Jack Quaid of it all being the son of Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid. There's a little bit of that happening in this movie.
Fair enough. And yeah, I don't mean anything like that he was bad. He's not bad at all.
I didn't think you were saying that. I was just making a general
pointing out a fact.
musing.
I get it. All right, fair.
That's what I do. I bring up general musings.
The last part of that scene where we're introduced to everybody, we get the other introductions of that Wes is the son of Judy Hicks, the returning legacy character from Scream 4, and also a newer character, Vince Schneider, played by Veronica Mars' Kyle Gallner, as the romance for Liv, who turned out to be creepy. These two characters are some of the characters I actually did have a minor problem with, and I'll deal with that first. I see that. Except for our audio listeners, we have a feline in the back of PJ.
There's a random Buddy sighting. This never happens.
Yeah, I actually don't know if I've seen Buddy before, to be honest with you.
Buddy the Hutt has graced us with his presence.
Wow, hi, Buddy. Good to see you.
I
usually get Indiana Jones here, and I'm surprised I don't even see Indiana Jones is usually whenever I'm on air at night. He must know we're not live or something, because he's usually right in here, like up on top here, trying to get his face in the camera. But returning back, the characters of Hicks and Schneider. There are some of the problems I did have with the film. Schneider more than Hicks to a degree. Schneider, I didn't like. I just feel like there should have been more done with him. Like, they kind of introduced this like minor subplot. I felt they were going somewhere with it, and then it was like, okay, so he's basically just the original red herring of who a killer could be, because they're pointing him out so right away, so it's not the case. But at the same time, they kill him really quickly. The next scene.
We don't get any real information with him. I almost missed that he was even related to Stu.
I think it was it's very after the fact you find out later on. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so that threw me a little bit, if I'm honest with you. And it's funny because he was actually sharing some behind the scenes photos recently on his Twitter, and one of them was a picture with him in the bar where he was with Dewey. Right. That is not a scene that is in the movie, ultimately.
Right.
So I'm curious about what was cut out there just in general, because I would have liked more from that before he had been killed off.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
the one. Just didn't get a chance to know him at all. It's like all of a sudden who is this? Oh, he's dead.
He was the most glaring issue of there might have been a little too many characters overall.
Right.
And I wish that they had established more who he was, because ultimately the idea of him being offed because he was related to a legacy character is fine and good. But the problem is they didn't focus on it enough. Like, it's very quickly said that he's related in some capacity to Stu, but it's done so quickly.
It's not even done in like a great reveal like fashion. It's like an I go, oh, it's just kind of like passed over like this. Like, oh, he was he's Stu's nephew or something, like whatever it was.
Yeah,
it just didn't make sense.
So it was just kind of odd. As far as Judy Hicks coming back, I liked the addition of her being here again, just because I thought she was such a major addition in Scream 4, and I liked the character, and I kind of liked where she ended up. Although I did have questions, because is she married? Or is she a single mom? The only reason I asked that, she must be a single mom, because her whole like back and forth with Dewey in 4, it's never brought up that she had a kid.
Which had to have been alive at that point, right?
He had to have been. He couldn't be in high school otherwise.
High school, 2011, 10 years later. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's not something I'm going to worry about, obviously. Is
it Dewey's kid?
I mean,
do we just have that revelation that we're going to reveal that was Dewey's kid?
No, because that would be bad.
They're all gone anyway.
Doesn't make
It
sense.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No.
It was bad storytelling. It'd be bad storytelling. They're all gone anyway.
Real bad storytelling if that ended up being the case. But it's just something I noticed. But I liked Judy in this. But what I thought was really great is the use of her and Wes ended up being, as the rules are broken down, Wes gets really worried that he's going to be a victim because he's related to a legacy character. And they joke that, well, he can't possibly be the next victim because he's the son of a legacy character introduced in the terrible sequels that no one cares about.
Right.
And so he ends up not being the next victim, but the victim right after, because they decide to kill her first. The target ends up being Judy and then Wes. Right. And it's very, very well done.
It is. I will give you that. Like I said, I had a problem with it. My problem is not having her back in it. I think that Judy Hicks was a fun enough character they had introduced in Scream 4, and getting more legacy characters back is always kind of fun, seeing different combinations of characters maybe we didn't get to see before. And it's always good to have that history. And the performer, the actor, it's who's the actor's name? It's Melody. I can't remember her name.
Marley Shelton.
Marley Shelton. I'm sorry. I love
who is in, again, The Sandlot. You goddamn monster. Please go back and watch it.
That's right. I watched it. I can never remember.
I yelled at you about this last time.
You did. She is good at what she does. I feel like the character has actually grown from Scream 4. I feel like she's had, because Scream 4, she had that, like, the puppy dog love for Dewey. She had the lingering resentment-ish of Sydney to a degree. But it seemed like she was brought back just to be killed. That kind of felt like at times.
To be honest.
And like, it's like, we're going to pull on your heartstrings by killing off a legacy character. And I feel like it didn't have as much of an emotional impact as you were. Because a lot of people saw Scream 4, or there was a kind of like gap in the knowledge. Like, I feel like people might not even realize who she was, comparatively speaking, that she was in the last one. Unless you noticed the Lemon Square edition, which I did like that little note on the door about the lemon squares.
I thought that was a great callback.
That was a great callback for that.
Look, I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I almost don't mind at the same time that ultimately she was brought back to be that, because it also becomes, number one, this is one of the greatest shot. You're waiting for Ghostface to literally be anywhere when it comes to Wes's sequence.
Right.
But the other thing that works really well for me in this is that if you're going to kill a legacy character at the beginning, everyone assumed right away that it would have been Dewey, but I was glad that they dragged that out and someone else had to die before Dewey.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I will admit that. And I will throw out there that at least story-wise, it did make sense. It made sense if Dewey was not the sheriff anymore. She was already part of the department. She was obviously a very good cop during that whole time. She obviously was very good at her job. So her becoming the sheriff did make all the sense in the world. So I will give the storytellers that kind of credit for that, for sure.
100%, man. And I'll say also, in thinking about all this, I'm glad that it went that way, because it really did ultimately show there was going to be teeth to the movie. Even if it wasn't like the most major character, to even off a mom and a son in the way that they did was such a great move, because it showed that at the end of the day, anyone was going to be kind of up for grabs, and I was really here for that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will also say, though, that this is one of the things that did take me out of the movie a little bit to a degree, and it happens sometimes in Scream movies, so it was a quick thing. Man, Judy gets killed, like, in broad daylight in the middle of the street, like, sun out. Everybody, that was such a brazen murder, like, out in the open.
I had the same thought. I was a little surprised that it happened as it did.
It was a backyard or something, maybe?
No, the front yard.
No, if it was the backyard, it would have been I kind of like got it. Okay, I'll like, it's right out there, and this is not like a not a busy street. I mean, it's a suburb area, and obviously it's not like a main street, but there was traffic there, and there's neighbors that would have been out. It seemed very brazen considering how long it took to just stab through her. It's fine.
Well, look, I just assume it was Amber, because I assume most of the murders in this movie were Amber, and I'm going to be honest with you. The thing about Amber is that she's clearly fucking nuts. Just totally batshit crazy. So her murdering someone in broad daylight almost doesn't not ring true to me because I don't think she cares. Like, the fact that I can chalk it up to that, totally fine.
And speaking of Dewey, after all of this, we actually kind of skipped over in this way. We're kind of, like I said before, where this is much more free-form than our Stream 1 through 4 breakdowns. But let's go back to Dewey, because we didn't get a chance to really see how the reintroduction of the legacy characters was going to affect us and how it worked or didn't work. And in this case, we get to see Dewey after the hospital visit between Sam and Jenna Ortega's character. A great sequence there, by the way. I will say, yes. I'm bringing it even further just a little bit. Some great moments. You had the introduction of Jack Quaid meeting Amber and all those kind of things. You had some great wordplay there. It almost felt Williamson-esque in a way, that kind of sequence where they had was kind of like this quick give and take of dialogue as we learn quickly who the relationships are between these characters, where we stand now. We got the little fight between Jenna and Sam a little bit, but it's a great, powerful, tumultuous emotions that go through the place. But it all leads to Sam wanting to go to the source and figure out what's going on, which is where we go to finally meet Dewey Riley, and our first, obviously not Hicks, but the return of the first of the big three.
Yeah, and this is a great sequence. What's funny is we talked a lot about the idea of we didn't love in Scream 2 and 3 every time it would shake up the relationship between Dewey and Gale, and immediately we're thrown into this world where they are now divorced and like everything's moved on. But the reason it works in this is that so much time has passed, alternatively compared to 2 and 3, that so much time has passed and they had changed so much, and Dewey deciding he couldn't make it in New York in the way that Gale could, and he wasn't comfortable there in the same way she was never comfortable in Woodsboro. It actually felt like a surprisingly smart choice, because ultimately it kind of proved that they were never really meant to be together.
Right.
Because neither of them could be comfortable with the other's life in a way. And I thought that was actually really interesting. But every morning he would wake up and he'd watch her morning show in New York, which, by the way, did you catch there was a Friends reference in this one? Yeah. Which I thought was great. Because we noticed, we've made note as it went along that there was always friend references in the movie because of Courtney Cox's involvement. Right. So I thought that was really great. The little it was basically a joke aimed at the reunion that she did on HBO Max.
Yep, which is great.
Which was really great. But I like that
there's also the bangs reference, by the way. I like that too. Like the blinking, you hear it tell we attacked the bangs because her bangs in Scream 3 are god awful, and she admits it. She hated it, the whole thing. So we had just a little bit of a peek of that little inside nod to the fans who've been around the whole time.
Yeah, and I like that. As weird as it sounds, like Dewey kind of being the one who has been hit hardest by all this. He lost his sister early on with Tatum. He, this whole back and forth with him and Gale has been hard on him. And so he's decided that alcohol is the device. And of all the characters, Dewey kind of ultimately makes the most sense to be the one who probably found his way to a bottle and was trying to put everything behind him. And it's surprisingly poignant, and it worked really well.
It did work well because, I'm quite honestly, and I don't mean to be disparaging. I don't want to be disparaging at all, but David Arquette also looks like just if you look at the three of them together, he looks like he's lived the harder life. I know he's a wrestler now and everything else. Himself up that way and everything else.
There's a lot of truth to all their characters in this movie.
Yes.
The things with him and Gale in general have always felt like they are meta commentaries on the actual lives and relationship that he and Cox actually shared.
Right. Absolutely.
And so that's why it works, is because there has been the stuff that's come out about their past. There is the stuff that they've been very open about. And it just felt like that was 100% them leaning in on the we know that you guys know, we know what you've heard, and they kind of lean on it. They kind of use it to push the characters. And dude, Arquette is so great in this movie.
He is. He really deserves his credit in this one. I really enjoyed his presence. He knew what he was there for. He filled the role spectacularly. I do want to say real quick, just to bring it back a smidge, this is another moment for me where I got annoyed initially, because my whole rant the whole time has been Dewey and Gale's reset. So also we get this thing where Dewey and Gale are split apart again. I'm like, oh, here we fucking go again. That was my initial instinct. Here we fucking go again. We're doing the same goddamn thing. It's a never-ending loop. And yet I, too, was amazed at how quickly I came around on it. And partially it is because the very next sequence we see, where we get to see Dewey and Gale come together again. But I agree that you said about Dewey really shouldering the load. Of all the characters, despite, God, this is obviously spoilers, he's the one who doesn't make it out. I feel like we got the best out of him out of the three in terms of emotional weight. He feels a little tired. Okay. Take a break.
We're good. He growled and I wasn't sure. So you're picking up from he's tired.
Yeah, all right.
Oh, wait. See? Glad I said something.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see, make sure I have these all down. Okay. And so he's tired. He feels a little bit dragged down. And that's always the risk you run when you bring back a movie that's 25 years old now, is that some of the fans are a little older. They feel a little more world weary. And he becomes kind of like our re-entry point into the series as well.
Mm-hmm.
It
works really great, man.
Yeah, it does.
And I love the meeting between him and Samantha and Richie.
Yes.
And it's really great because straight up, first thing he brings up is Richie. It's the first thing he does, is that Richie is probably the killer.
It is the rules. It's always the love interest. And it's right. He does. We mentioned this before, how when we saw the trailer, it did seem like this is where we're going to miss Randy the most. It seems like Dewey is filling in for Randy in terms of the rules. And he does, which is good in a way, but it's only partially true, because we get some rules from Dewey, and we do get a whole new rule sequence with Randy's niece, which works very well. But that's the Recoil scene that's coming up soon. But I do get this idea they're going to Dewey for answers, and Dewey brings up right away, we should listen to him. We should always listen to him, because it's very much just like the initial sequence of Randy in the video store with Stu pointing out that Billy Loomis is the killer. They're telling us right away, this is your killer. This is it.
Just like Scream 2. They tell us it's Timothy Oliphant. They tell us over lunch.
Yep. We gotta get him. We should be really recognizing this at this point. But it comes across and done so well. I think part of it is we're a little bit wrapped up in seeing Dewey again for the first time. So we kind of like are just letting things, we're not maybe as acute in our senses and our predictions. But I do like that we have this sequence, and I like how they bring him back in, because Dewey always has felt he's got this sense of duty. No matter what's going on, he's going to help his people out, even if they're not people they know very well. It's just, it's his community. He's a community guy. That's what he does.
No, totally. I don't disagree with you at all. And ultimately, I think that him being our focal point back just is the thing that works the best, because I think that outside of Randy, he's always been like the realist character.
Right.
And so this sequence is great, though, because after, he meets them and they go away, he ends up calling Sydney, and he's the reveal to Sydney of what's going on. And I finally got my goddamn answer. What happened to Mark Kincaid? What happened to McDreamy? McDreamy?
He married her.
Scream 4 didn't tell me what happened. I finally got the answer. I'm so happy that McDreamy and Sid have been living happily ever after with these kids and living and surviving outside of that Scream 4 instance. But it was just good. It felt like they were trying to wrap up things that they knew fans had been asking, because I know that I've been asking that since the fourth movie. What the hell happened to Mark Kincaid?
Yes. And maybe, you know what? Maybe what happened, and I'll throw it out there, maybe after Scream 3, maybe they had some time together. Maybe they took some time apart. Maybe Scream 4 happened when they were apart, and they got back together after Scream 4. Maybe that's what happened. We don't know.
I just assumed that when she went on her publicity tour, he didn't want anything to do with it.
That could be it. That could be very well it. Of course, it does bring up a problem for me. I'll do every once in a while. I have the PLD nitpicks that I do. I'll do them in the film. I know you do. All right. The Mark Kincaid we met in Scream 3. Scream 3 happens. He was witnessing the incidents of Scream 3. Scream 4 happened when she returned to Woodsboro. He's going to let her go to Woodsboro by herself for the incidents of Scream 5?
She probably said you have to stay home with the kids.
You're telling me he's not finding a way to get some babysitters up there. He's going to let
because he doesn't want his kids to have no parents later. He knows the score. He knows what's going to happen. He knows that if he goes, there's going to be no parents.
Look,
if he lets her go by herself, at least he can still be the dad.
You know what? But maybe he was. You know what? It's true. It could be that he was too busy off filming. Off filming the sequel to My Life.
God damn it! You had to go there. You had to bring up the My Life thing.
I did.
One of the greatest screen readings of all time.
Greatest screen readings in my life as well, for very different reasons.
I'm just saying,
most entertaining.
You can be all mad and pissed off all you want, motherfucker. But I think at the end of the day, he made the right choice, because he was like, look, if she dies, at least I can take care of the kids, because they're not coming for me. Because I'm just another character from one of the shitty sequels that no one cares about.
Fair enough. But now, I was very happy for you. I was very happy for you when I heard that. I was like, PJ got his answer. Good for him.
I was just happy, and I liked that there was like kind of a casual dig by Dewey being like, so you're keeping him? Like this idea that he still clearly does not get along with Kincaid post Scream 3, which I thought was really good. And I kind of liked that he, you know, when he told Gail what was going on, he just texted her.
Yes. That was one of my favorite sequences.
Call her. Yeah,
right.
He couldn't call her, so he texts her. It works so well for me.
It did.
Which made their reintroduction together, her being like, you texted me? You told me about this through text, was so great.
So good. We'll get there. We will get there. The first sequence to do first is when Dewey comes back. We get the great sequence we've just mentioned before, which was the Recoil Scene. Which is basically the rule scene done over to a degree, but it's a nice little nod. It gives Randy's niece there a chance to shine in a way that she needed, and in a way that let her become the Randy character that we know and want in this franchise. And while it's a little on the nose and it's a little expected at this point, it just works so well. It doesn't work so well talking about all the recoils, given the rules. And it works even better than the Scream 3 one did with the Randy video, to be honest with you. It actually felt...
Oh, it 100% does. And one of the great things about this is we get the cameo from Heather.
Yes.
Matarazzo coming back as Martha. Her bringing all the snacks and the drinks for the kids is like such a great moment. And loved this
Dewey,
scene.
which is nice. There's a nice little connection there.
Loved this whole sequence, thought it was so great. And this is where Jasmine Brown like blew me away.
Yes,
just her whole monologue about requels and franchises and what it means to people. I felt like she was pointing and talking to me, man, because everything she's talking about like you're 10 years old and you're sitting next to your parent and you're watching these things and this impact that they have on you, like these people, it becomes something that they're so passionate about and they care about it so much, which is why now you and I are sitting here doing what is arguably probably going to be a 2.5 hour podcast at this point about Scream and like how much it means to us and what it means to bigger, like these big fandoms now and the divisiveness of them and this idea that they think that they own them and just everything about the way she held herself was so great. And I loved it. I loved everything about this scene.
Yeah, it was, this one, for pardon the pun, it screamed Scream. This felt 100%. Like a Scream scene that we need. And it's usually my favorite scene in the Scream franchises. And every sequel has them. This is the one that comes across as well. This one comes across almost as well as the first one. This is the best one since the first one. I felt like
easily
it was right on, and it was just right spot on with the intelligence factor, the cultural factor, and it was a great way to kind of get some exposition out in a fun way. And that's why I love it.
It totally works. And on top of that, this is also when she ends up revealing to everyone that she's obviously the daughter Billy Loomis,
Right.
which we really didn't even talk about. She does reveal it to her sister at the hospital. It goes not well.
Not well.
Not well at all, to the point that Sam has the first hallucination where we see Billy.
Yes.
Where she's talking to him in the mirror inside the hospital when Ghostface attacks her for the first time.
Right.
And it's a really great sequence. The Ghostface of it all, like the way it's revealed, is really great. And it works really well. And this movie is particularly staged well. Again, I really kind of glossed over it. Dylan's death is so well done. The way that they leave you every time you're waiting for the jump scare,
Not there.
it's not there, and it builds the tension, and the music builds up and crescendos, and there will be nothing. And they do it again, and nothing happens. The way that they continually pull it and play it works really, really great.
It worked really well in the theater.
Awesome.
I saw it like in the theater watching, because I had people like around me who like they had that nervous laughter. Like it'd be like a dun, 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 dun. Close the door, nothing there.
Yeah, you're breathing. You remember to breathe.
Right. And I love it. I love it so much. It works.
I love
well.
it so much.
And
it works so well.
His death was my second favorite death. Just because the way they shot the knife through the neck, like going in and out.
Yeah.
I was like, was it in there enough that it made it die?
Well, and then like the slowly lowering him to the ground, and like, it's so good. It's so good. So everything about this scene is great. And I like the way that everything just becomes, they're like, wait, so literally all of this has to do with the fact that you're somehow related to the original killer.
Right.
And just like this, you should probably, like, this is all your fault then.
Right.
And I kind of loved that.
I did too. I did love that too. It's so good. But then we have, all right, so we have that sequence, and that's kind of where we had up to before. We already talked about Judy's death. This is, we have that reunion between Dewey and Gail.
Wow, we really brought that full circle in a beautiful way. Everything kind of crescendoed to this moment because everything we've talked about. It's almost like we're professional led to this moment of Gail and Dewey's reunion because Wes has now been killed. They show up at Judy Hicks's death scene.
Yes.
Or death house, rather.
Murder house, whatever.
Murder house. I stayed in a murder house Airbnb once.
I remember you telling me all about it. It's kind of fun. Yeah. But anyway, we do get Gail and Dewey's reunion, and it's a perfect reunion. And despite the fact that I was annoyed at first, this made it worth it to me because she yells at him about the texts. They have their back and forth. It felt more genuine, and it's because they lived through it. And that's like we were talking about. This is where the reality bleeding in helps. Like in Scream 2, when they kind of reset, didn't feel real because they were still in that like honeymoon phase. I mean, between Scream 1 and Scream 2, there was not even a year had gone by, and they were just starting to get together at that point. They didn't have this like history together, which they were supposedly going to have. Scream 3, they didn't have the real true history together. Scream 4 worked well, but Scream 5, you felt the weight of everything. You felt the weight of them having lived through this very Dewey and Gail life. So they put a lot more realism behind them than they ever had before, and it finally felt earned.
It totally did, and it number one, her first reveal is so great with her getting out of a news van and then her just hitting Dewey and being like, you told me through text, and just being so upset about it, but also the very real nature of the conversation and the way that they play off each other is so good. And it reminds me why we like these characters so much and why we were always rooting for them to be together. And this idea that, ultimately Dewey was a coward.
Yeah. 100%.
And he ran away in the middle of the night, and he just left a note essentially. And
only a coward when it comes to his own personal life.
Yeah.
That's the key factor. I love the reveal of him letting her know. It wasn't done purposefully in a way. Just he let it slip. He watches her every day still. Yeah,
100%. And it's so great, and it just works so well. Yeah. And it's a bummer ultimately that this is the only scene that they have, but it's such a powerful scene that that's why it needed to be. And if it wasn't them, I don't know if it would be nearly as powerful ultimately.
I'm going to counter you about saying it's a bummer because I honestly wonder, and I could be wrong again. I want to watch it again to see if that still holds true to me. I honestly feel like because of my problematic history with their relationship being reset, the fact that they only had this one scene together made it work even more.
No, I agree with that. It's more of a bummer in the idea of I'm going to do that annoying thing, and it's more I just really would have liked to see the three of them again in one scene.
This is the Han, Leia, and Luke thing.
But ultimately, I don't really care.
Yeah,
because I care what works for the characters, and this works for the characters. And I thought it was a great story beat. Again, it did feel like it was basically flying in the face of the stuff that people were talking about when it came to The Force Awakens. Like this movie, 100% did exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. Except in this one, they decided to kill Dewey halfway through the movie versus towards the end of the movie.
Right. And the other big difference is even though Dewey and City didn't get any screen time together, they did have the phone call as these. They did have that was a little bit of closure for us, the way that we didn't get.
Also, I love in their phone call when he's like, Sid, don't come here. And she's like, no offense, Dewey, but I have no desire to ever fucking set foot inside Woodsboro ever again.
But of course, also, you have a gun? I'm Sidney fucking Prescott. Of course I have a gun.
Yeah. It's so good, man. It's so good. It works so well. Makes me very happy.
Because this is where we do, well, no, we'll get to Nev Campbell coming back in a bit. Because let's talk about the big scene there.
Yeah, we got to push forward.
They have the moment, and this is one of my other nitpicks. I mentioned this before yesterday when we were talking on the phone. We're talking on the phone about it.
I'm listening.
I know we have Sam discovering that the sheriff or deputy who was supposed to be watching over her sister is now there at the scene, and she gets really upset and like, well, who's guarding my sister? She's like, oh, I had to go. It had to happen. And she freaks out like, I got to go get my sister. I got to figure out my sister or whatever. And she runs and Dewey follows her. And of course, my own little nitpick is like, they leave in broad daylight. Just we talk about the death is in broad daylight. Time to get to the hospital, it's like dark and pitch black out. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck is this hospital? How far away is this hospital from and Woodsboro can't be that big of a place. It's not like that big of a place where you're going like hours away, almost in a way, it felt like. You pointed out that it seemed like it was enough dusk for you that it made it okay. I have to watch it again to see. It did bother me a little bit. But I digress. It's not a movie killer.
You're a fool.
I might be a fool.
No, you're not. You're allowed to feel how you feel. It's fine. But I love this too, because this is basically the merging of everything we've talked about in the scenes, is that now Samantha and Dewey are together again. It's bringing everything full circle because she's going to try to rescue Tara because she is convinced that Ghostface is clearly going to be there. And she's right. They get to the hospital. Ghostface has already begun terrorizing poor Tara.
Well, don't gloss over the fact that this is Joshua Jackson's second appearance in the Scream movie.
Oh, yeah.
Film theory from Scream 2, film theory class. There he is in his full pacey, glorious, as they're watching Dawson's Creek. Some little Kevin Williamson reference right there as well. I thought
that was great.
It was perfect. It was so good.
I wonder if that means that the character in Scream 2... Nah, I'm not going to go there.
Are you gonna make Dawson's Creek a part of?
I was gonna say, I wonder, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't play. So maybe he's just a dude who looks a lot like Joshua Jackson.
There you go, could be.
Because there's implications there. But I digress.
That's a totally different podcast. So that way, yes, the Ghostface is there. You do get to see another attack on Tara again, which is funny because I brought this up before. The reason why having Tara survive the opening sequence left it open.
Joshua Jackson apparently is playing himself as film class guy number 1.
Oh.
So his character apparently doesn't have a name. I am discovering this as we're sitting here. I've never looked into this. So now my in-canon thought process as we're sitting here is that they were in film school with Joshua Jackson, who then goes on to star in Dawson's Creek.
So that is the Scream universe. Joshua Jackson plays Pacey in Dawson's Creek.
Because Dawson's Creek starts in 1998. Scream 2 is 1997.
So he left Windsor College after the death sequence. He's like, I gotta get the fuck out of here because everybody's dying. Oh,
Yeah.
I got auditioned for a movie or for a TV show, which is partially created by this guy named Kevin Williamson. I love it. Let's do it.
That is 100% what happened.
I love it. I'm all on board. I'm in. I am all in.
Does that also mean that in Ocean's 11, is Ocean's 11 in the Scream universe?
The multiverse of madness. I think it is. I think it is.
Because remember, Joshua Jackson also plays himself because Rusty is helping him learn how to gamble and win money during the classes.
That's true.
At the beginning of the movie.
That's very intriguing. This is definitely another podcast. We're going to have to do another podcast solely about this. Maybe it's a Patreon exclusive, maybe.
I'm just fascinated now because now that this has opened up so many doors of information that I don't think anyone else has ever thought of in the way that I have until this moment.
Probably for good reason, but I'm there with you.
How dare you?
I'm there with you. I'm saying that we're a little nutty ourselves. I'm right there with you.
Okay, all right.
I digress. We're back in the hospital. She's watching Joshua Jackson perform. And then she gets attacked. And it's another. So I was talking about initially, what I brought that up is that I said before that Tara surviving helped making a red herring for when Jack, I was going to say Randy Quaid. Wow.
You've been doing that every time we've talked.
I don't understand why I'm doing this. I can't remember names. And the heat of the moment. Oh, God. Either way, she's brought up as a red herring. And I bought into it briefly. And I shouldn't have, because quite frankly, when you think about it long enough, you're like, well, we saw her in the beginning and she got her ankle stomped and she's all scared and terrified. And if that's the case, then who's she acting for? Right.
Right.
But because we're so into the movie, we're okay with it in a way. I don't know where I'm going with this at this point. I just totally lost my train of thought. That's okay.
I love that that's where your train of thought ended, and I was just going to let it sit in that awkward silence there for a second.
I appreciate
just
that.
to see how you could, if you were going to pull yourself out or not. Like that, you nosedived it. It was beautiful. Like just, I watched the thought leave your brain, and it was just like, it was amazing. No, we talked about this too. Is that I definitely bought into it. And I almost bought into it in a way that I thought we were going to see something. As the movie was playing, and I was like, what if she's the mastermind?
Right.
What if she never donned the mask, but she had planned all of this? And then eventually it's kind of floated in the movie. What if she's the killer? And I really bought into that because that's kind of what you're talking about and alluding to. And this sequence in the hospital, I could almost see where that could be played up. Because if you look at it, Ghostface is messing with Sam on the phone.
Right.
About who she's going to hurt, right?
Right.
But ultimately, Ghostface didn't have to do that. And Ghostface kind of draws it out in a way that doesn't feel like Ghostface. And not in a bad way. It's Ghostface toying with someone so intently when they could just kill the person in front of them. And so then it was like, oh, so why let her live other than you're hoping to draw her there because you are controlling this?
Right. That's right. And you know what? That makes a lot of sense in the world. Everything was kind of geared up that way. To me, that actually is definitely a sign of very good writing in a way, because there actually legitimately was ways you could see the writers taking it, and not necessarily being bad ways they could have taken it. Like if they decided to go that way, I could have went along with that and been okay with it.
Yeah, it totally worked for me. And that's why this whole scene, by the way, we really got to focus on this hospital sequence is one of the great sequences in the franchise. And I think that the coolest thing about it is it pits Tara, it pits Richie, it pits Sam and Dewey all against this Ghostface.
Right.
And the
pause.
Hey, kaijus, can you simmer down a little bit? Thank you. So anyway, you're not going to have to edit that out. I don't mind that I was telling the dogs to be quiet, but I apologize. What it does is it pits them all against this ghost face, and it starts to kind of test the merits of all the characters in a very interesting way in how they react to Ghostface in the ways that they're handling the situation. But for all the stuff that Dewey has gone through, the one thing he never stopped doing was trying to be the hero.
Right.
And that's the great part of this whole sequence is I think it's laid out so well. The way that Ghostface is kind of toying with Tara before Richie shows up, her hitting Richie with the phone, then that kind of being, Ghostface finds them. He calls Sam. He's saying you have to choose who lives or die in this situation. And that's again why I kind of thought once it was floated, well, what if Tara's behind it? Well, yeah, because Sam didn't even choose her.
Right.
She didn't choose anyone.
Right. And
so the way it plays out is really great. And then Dewey shoots Ghostface a bunch of times. They're all going to get away. But what did Dewey not do? Didn't shoot Ghostface in the head. The one thing that Dewey has been told time and again, shoot them in the head.
Shoot them in the head.
Cost him his life.
And it's a great moment. And you know it's going to happen. You almost know it's going to happen just the way they set it up.
Oh, totally.
The door closes. He has this moment. The score kind of swells. He turns around. It's almost like if that scene could have a title in our mind, like if we had scene cards, like this one comes up, Dewey's Last Stand. Like just totally like Dewey's Last Stand is coming up. So Dewey has this walk back, and I gotta say, this is my favorite kill of the movie because of how
100%.
savage it is. And how necessarily savage it is because it's Dewey. That's why it has to be that way. Dewey gets stabbed in the front, you're kind of like, so he can live through that. He gets stabbed in the back, he could still probably live through that. And then you watch him like
tear him up and down.
Tear him, like, I don't think he can live through that.
Well, because Dewey's lived through a lot to this point, so I'm glad that they really made it a point. And the other thing I really love is the trailer did a great job of getting around the fact that the line in the trailer of "It's an honor," in the trailer, it's pointed at Sid.
Yes,
like they're meeting Sid for the first time. That is not the case here.
No, this
line is used in the death of Dewey. Yes. Ghostface is saying it's an honor to kill you because you're a legacy character in my movie.
Right. You're one of the originals.
That is savagely fucked up and dark, and I loved it.
I was here for it.
I loved it so much, and it feels like the kind of thing that a crazy person would say, and that would be Amber. Amber's a fucking crazy person. I'm just throwing it out there.
Ooh. I almost feel like we should. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I feel like in this movie, like you kind of like everybody's a suspect, and so every time you're thinking at one point, this person's the killer. Oh, maybe it's this person the killer. Maybe it's this person. I did pin my eye on Amber pretty early on, and it's not her fault. It's just that there is something about her that screams she can go to a dark place. She can go to a crazy place.
She has crazy eyes.
Yes, it is.
Mikey Madison, I apologize.
Oh, it's a good thing in this way. Honestly, I like it. I like it a lot.
And we'll get to. I love that she was one of the Manson girls in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I have something to talk about when we get to there too.
A little Easter egg for that as well. It's true. Yeah. So death of Dewey. It's a very earned death. Everything works. It works for the movie. It works for the character. It's a fitting end for the character. So all hail Dewey. Nice to have known you. That's your last stand. You're done in Scream 5.
I hope that Randy had a videotape of Stab in heaven waiting for him.
I hope he did too. Stabs 1 through 7, but not 8 because 8 was not Stab.
Allegedly. I also love that this movie, and this is going to sound so like, I don't know how to say this, less hoity-toity, but more just like film bro-y. And it's like, I was so glad that they made all the elevated horror jokes and like just knocked this idea that horror has to always be like elevated beyond the slasher genre.
Right.
And this movie was like, screw that. Like, we're doubling down on why these kind of movies are really great. And it works so well for me.
Right.
And I was just like, this is so great. This is so funny to me because like there is this sense now of, well, yes, I love horror movies, but I love elevated horror movies because I'm that hoity-toity smart person, and I will enjoy my charcuterie board and wine. And I like wine and a good charcuterie board.
And I like good elevated horror. I like good elevated horror.
I like elevated horror. But there is a side of people who are like think that they definitely come across as they're better than other people for liking those kind of horror movies.
100%.
Versus people like you and I who are like, yes, I have seen Friday the 13th Part 2, Scream, and Nightmare on Elm Street at least 100 times.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going through Friday the 13th again during this because I wanted to. Just because I wanted to.
I'm probably going to because you are doing it. It's making me want to.
The funny thing is, here's the best part about that. Again, planning things out. We know that we're going to do Halloween at some point. I can't see us not doing Friday the 13th, but here we are watching through Friday the 13th now. You're going to go watch Friday the 13th part now. And yet, a year or two from now, we're going to go, we got to rewatch it again now to do it for the podcast. Oh, twist my arm.
I know, right? I mean, look, I am the person who will likely also. I've already rewatched all the Puppet Master movies.
No.
It's not even the end of January. I will likely watch all the Universal Monster movies throughout the year. I will likely watch for all the Friday the 13th. I go through most of these series that I really love or were like imprinted on me at least once a year.
I do at least once a year or once every 2 years. Maybe sometimes it gets through. But yeah, it's definitely a regular. You know what, though? Here's to us, hopefully doing the Friday the 13th one as a run-in to the new Friday the 13th movie that's going to eventually be made.
Oh, God, I hope we get a new Friday the 13th
So do I. So
anyway, Dewey's slaughtered by Amber because Amber's a crazy person. And
which does actually kind of make is one thing that does, in retrospect, go, does Amber have that strength? Does Amber have the strength to do what she did to Dewey in that case?
I don't even care, to be honest with you. It doesn't. At this point, I just accept it. I know that there's people talking about it online, and they're like, there's no way. And I'm like, guys, we have seen much weirder things in a Scream movie. Like, here's the other thing. I'm 95% sure that Amber does most of the murders in the movie.
I think she does too, because you see Jack on screen quite a bit during the times.
So, Amber's clearly the crazy one.
Oh, yeah.
As far as all that is going. So, I love that her kills are savage, man.
Yeah. Oh,
they
yeah.
They really are.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I really like it. It really, really works for me. So we catch up at the
261 turn lane.
Huh? Well, no, because we have to meet Sydney. Sydney shows up.
Oh, yeah.
After the death of Dewey, because she got on the first flight to get out to Woodsboro. This is where the timeline does get a little wonky. I'm going to be honest. It's very clear that, like, when did she find out and how fast could she get out there? Because where is she versus where is Woodsboro?
Right.
I'm not going to put too much stock into it. It really doesn't bother me. It's movie time. And as we've learned over the last 2 years anyway, time is a construct.
Exactly.
But she shows up, has a conversation. And that's where, she finally meets Samantha for the first time. She's trying to talk Sam into, like, you can't run away from this. As much as you want to run away from it, you need to confront it. And Sam's like, no, I'm getting the hell out of Dodge. Like, me, Richie, and my sister, we're leaving. We want nothing to do with this. Like, I'm sorry about what happened to you and your fucked up life, but I'm not going to be Sydney 2.0. And she's just going to run from it. And I love Sydney's like, look, I came here and I'm not leaving until this fucker's in the ground because I have kids and I'm not letting this come home with me.
Right. And it would.
And so they have this whole kind of confrontation. Sam, Richie, and her sister get in the car. They're going to leave.
Right.
And they're going to leave town. And so what does Sydney do? She puts a tracker on the car because that's what Gail Weathers would do.
I love that moment. That moment because it's a great moment between her and Gail. And Gail has
so good.
And Gail's impressed and it works so well.
Because I think Sydney knows that something's about to go awry, and they want to be able to be there to end this. Right. Because that's what this ultimately is that they want to end this.
Right. They're the veterans. And they got a personal stake now that they killed Dewey at this point. It's a more even personal stake at this point. They got to take care of business. Yeah. So there we are. We're going, and we find out that Amber lives at 261 turn lane.
Hey, we're back.
We're back to Stu's house in a way. And I love they bring that back full circle.
It's so good. It works so well.
It does work so well. The moment
Um,
where Sydney goes into the house for the first time, and you're like, and she
Yeah.
like brings it all into her, and you're like, damn.
Well,
This is
the
real
funny
nice
thing
sequel.
is that so the whole setup is that we see throughout the movie that Tara has asthma and she needs her inhaler,
Yep.
and her inhaler is missing. So they decide to stop at Amber's house so she can get her extra inhaler because she knows it's at the house. And the thing I really like about this is that they don't clearly show you it's Stu's house right away.
Right.
There's a build up to the reveal that of where they are, and that pull out of the pull out of the camera as it twists and you realize where you're at with the door open is really, really great. But the movie does enough throughout where you're like, wait a second. Because if you're a Scream fanatic, you start to be like, wait a second. And you're looking around and you're like, that room looks real familiar.
Right. Yep.
The layout's changed a little bit, maybe, but this looks real familiar.
Well, I want to know what I want to go back and ask is like I remember when they got they made a big deal about the address, and it didn't hit me right away. It's like all right, fine, what's the address? And I don't remember if they said 261, but they did say Turner Lane, didn't they?
This
I
is
gotta
the
rewatch.
problem of only having seen it once is that I can't remember.
I might have glossed over it because I was so like Dewey dying and everything else. I might have been like just not quite there yet. I might have been like sometimes you go in and out of movies when you're like you're processing the previous scene and you miss that. But I think now that like I'm going back, I believe they said something about Turner Lane, and I would have been jumped. I can't believe I missed that right away because as soon as they said Turner Lane, I'm like, wait a fucking second, Turner Lane. That's not chosen. That's not chosen at random.
No, absolutely not. And this is that, again, it's kind of the brilliant callback to this idea that in requels, they tend to go back to something that's familiar for the third act. You tend to do something very similar to the original. It's something that Ghostbusters Afterlife has been talked about a lot. The Force Awakens has been talked about a lot. Jurassic World has been talked about a lot. They tend to lean on the first movie once they get to the third act. And a lot of the times, depending on how you do it, it can work. I think the talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife is fairly hyperbolic,
right,
to say the least.
Fully agree.
About how people perceive that movie and the way that it played out. So I loved that they did this because it really played into this narrative of what the movie was selling, but also what Stab had become. Right. And so this idea, we've talked about it a lot. Obviously, Richie and Amber are the killers in the film. And this reveal in the movie that the reason they're doing it is they're fans of Stab who didn't like that Stab reboot. And so they were trying to ground the movie and bring it back to the beginning and take it back to Woodsboro. And this time Sydney was going to die and they were going to be the new characters in the lead. And, they're writing their own movie.
They want to remake The Last Jedi.
Yeah. And like this idea that, obviously Mrs. Daughter would have to be the killer. And so that's why they're doing all this. And it's so great. It works so well. It's so well written and it plays because to God's honest truth, man, look how the internet's already reacted to the movie. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people online who are being fools.
Yep, there are.
And I'm not saying that you have to like the movie. That's not what I'm saying. No. But there's people that like legitimately are already being like, you ruined the franchise and all this crap, and just going out of their way to completely miss the point of what the movie is selling.
100%. And it actually is taking. If you're reacting to it that way, you are the problem. You are the villain of the story. This is speaking out exactly to these people who can't not leave well unknown, but they feel such ownership over something that's not theirs to begin with.
100%. And that's exactly what the movie is trying to say and do. And I love it for that because I think it's something that also needed to be said regardless. I mean, people have not learned that you can't act like this. We don't ultimately have an authority. It's just supposed to be entertainment. Right. So all this is playing out. And the thing that I really like about this scene is that, or this sequence in this third act ultimately, is that they really start to play roulette with who is the killer very fast and loose. Like everything they're setting up is anyone ultimately really could be. Yep. And like there's this whole dynamic between Mindy and Amber about going down into the cellar for the beer.
Yes.
that it is so on the nose and so great and works really well.
And
Then
very
there's the
reminiscent,
stuff,
very reminiscent of the Tatum scene.
right, which is the point, right?
Right.
Because she's going down to the cellar to get beer, so you're anticipating it.
Right, exactly. So it just it works so well. And it does the tension's amped up. Obviously, you got Chad leaving to go after his girlfriend because he thinks she might be the killer. It's kind of this funny sequence there, which kind of in a way throws back to the initial Sydney and Billy Loomis thing at that point, where like they had that confrontation about it.
Well, yeah, because she tries to get him to go upstairs, and he's like, "No, I'd rather not. Like, I want to be here where there's people because you could be the killer."
I'm a Meeks. I know the rules, kind of thing.
And so they're throwing this party, and it's going exactly as you expect, and so the trio shows up, and I love Jack Quaid being like the dad, being get out, party's over, no one's listening. It's
right.
Very fun, actually.
It is very fun.
Also, shout out to Mindy watching Stab. And this is my favorite moment is this is
my favorite moment of the whole movie.
It's so good. Is Mindy sitting on the couch watching Stab.
A little high.
And it's the sequence of Randy watching Halloween saying, turn around.
And she's like, Randy, turn around.
Yeah, and then she goes, wait, turn around. And she turns around, and there's a ghost face.
And there it is. It's payoff. It's a payoff that I didn't think I needed until that moment.
100%. I had no idea that I needed to see this moment play out in any capacity. And it's so good, and it's so earned, and it's so funny, and it's so fun. And I'm sure that there's people who don't love this scene, but for me, the reason it works is because, again, Scream has always had to have a sense of humor of itself.
Exactly. It's a meta thing, and you can go meta on yourself as well as the initial thing you're initially going meta on, or the slasher franchise. Now it's meta on yourself, and Mindy proves again why she's my favorite character in the new film.
And also, one of the things I really like too, and I've talked about this a little bit with people, and I think I even did with you before we recorded this, is that one of the things I like is that every time we get a new one of these movies, the Stab universe is expanded in some capacity. Like, since Scream, because the Stab movies didn't exist, Scream 2 expands it, Scream 3 expands it, Scream 4 expands it, now this one does. And in this one, the expansion of the universe outside of this reboot that we hear about is that we see more of the Stab movie that we've never seen.
Right.
And I kind of love that. And it feels like there's a really cool thing about seeing more of these movies.
Yes.
Like seeing the footage more, seeing what they look like. And there's probably no way that Rodriguez directed that stuff. I'm going to guess the Radio Silence guys did it because, Rodriguez actually directed the Stab sequence in Scream 2.
Right.
But I love that. I love it so much, man. It works. And this is, again, why this movie feels like such a love letter. It fucking cares.
Yes.
It's these little things that no one else might have thought about doing. And they were like, no, we can make it work.
And it does work. And that's the best part about it. So
totally, it's so good. It's so good, and so that's why we end up here. We end up in the Russian roulette of who's the killer. It's very, very quickly revealed that Amber is the killer. And
I love how quickly it is revealed. There's there's times for games, but sometimes you work against that. It's a surprising thing. You're like, it took me by surprise how quickly all of a sudden it's like, I'm the killer. I know. Because I am. Boom. Like, oh, shit, there it is.
It happened very quickly, and it threw me for a second.
Yeah.
Because similarly, I was waiting for it to... Because the whole scene is very chaotic, because essentially what happens is that Sam and them show up, the party is dissipated, and they find Mindy has been attacked.
Right.
And then Amber comes in with Tara, and she sees Sam with Mindy, and she's blaming Sam for what's happened to Mindy.
Right.
Then Liv walks in, and the chaos starts to ensue, and everyone's pointing fingers at everyone, and it's very chaotic in a really cool way, and then it escalates, kind of like what's happening behind me, and it escalates so fast that the moment that Amber pulls the gun out and kills Liv, I was not anticipating it.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for it at all. I was like, whoa.
And it hits hard, and it works really, really well. And so that's when what this movie is and the end game of what this movie becomes very clear.
Oh, very quickly becomes clear.
And that's like, it works so well. And so Sydney shows up, she's with Gail, Amber's outside. She's screaming bloody murder. And I love, like, this whole thing is trap, right?
Right.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. It's definitely a trap.
Yeah. And so what does she do? Fuck it. And she shoots Gail.
Right.
And then runs back inside.
Right. Oh, God, so good. So good.
It's so good because, again, it's playing against all the stuff that we know because of what these movies are, but lovingly.
Right.
Again, it's that meta awareness that even the characters are like, she's clearly lying. She's clearly one of the Ghostface.
Yes. I love it. I love this whole ending sequence. This whole movie predicates itself on hitting the ending. You have to hit the ending, and this one does. This one hits the ending perfectly with the new characters, the old characters, the loving touches to the originals, but enough new in there to make its own stand. It's a very difficult balance. Again, there's that word balance, but this one does hit that balance.
It totally does. And that's what I love about the whole end of the movie. Sydney walks into the house, and that's when things begin to escalate. We see her fighting ghosts. She's going through the house. Ghostface is on the phone with her. They're mocking each other.
Yep.
She's shooting every room, trying to figure out what's what. She finds Richie, shoots Richie in the leg.
Yep.
Ghostface pops out of the next door, knocks her down. This whole reveal that Richie is involved is really great, too.
I agree, 100%. And we should have seen it coming. It's a requel. You have to have it being the callback to the first film, which is, just as Dewey pointed out, it's the love interest.
100%, man.
So
100%. And I should have seen it coming. I didn't want to believe it because I mean, Jack Quaid really, really sells it to me.
He does. He does.
He's so good in it. He really makes me believe he doesn't even know what the stab movies are
right.
in the movie.
Right.
Him watching them for the first time or whatever is just so funny to me. But essentially this idea that Amber's family moves into the house. She becomes obsessed with the killings. She meets him on a message board, and they decide that, well, the stab movie sucked, and so we need to rewrite and get this back on track, and we're going to bring this back to basics.
Right.
It's got to be, it can be a legacy sequel, but it's got to be a back to basics one where the killer is actually the daughter of Billy Loomis, and Sydney's going to die, and Dewey's going to die, and Gail's going to die. And a couple of corgis are about to be thrown outside. But I digress. This idea essentially being they're doing it because they didn't like the last movie. Right. So their entire vendetta is just, we want a better movie.
They become murderers and plotting insane revenge because they didn't like a movie. And yet it feels like in this day and age that is an actual motivation that could actually happen.
Yeah. In this day and age, I believe it.
Oh my God. It's so meta on itself, and it's so on the nose. And it's why some people aren't going to like it. Some people are going to hate it because they're going to see themselves in it and be like, well, you're making fun of us. I don't get it.
Well, some of them can't even see that it's about them.
That's true. It comes that way too. That's a totally different story. But we get this great little final battle between everybody. And yeah, I'll let you talk about it. Your little Easter egg with Amber, which made me happy too. I didn't remember it until you brought it up. Like, oh, of course. So your Easter egg with Amber. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the best thing about this whole thing with Amber and like the big reveal of her being the killer, and the thing that makes me laugh is that the first time I really knew anything about this actress was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She's one of the three Mansons that goes into the house at the end of the film that ends up getting beat to shit by Brad Pitt's character. But in particular, she plays the crazy Manson girl that gets lit on fire. Cut to this film that decides to once again set Amber on fire. It is not lost on me that they decided to light her on fire again. She must be very good at being lit on fire. She must really enjoy the stunt. I don't know. But it's freaking incredible to me that this is the second movie in a row where she's played a total insane person trying to kill people who has been lit on fire.
That is... I loved that when you brought that to me. I actually sat back and had to sit back and like let that like flow over me. It's great that they did that. And yeah, maybe she's just good at being lit on fire. Maybe she likes it. Who knows? But I did
I don't
love
know.
the ending. That was another one of those savage moments where even after everything's said and done, even where Sydney and Gail obviously are pissed at her, and this is the one who obviously she's the one who killed Dewey. We know this at this point. And that's why Gail gets the chance to kill her off. I love that moment too, by the way, where Sydney gives her the gun and says, "This one's for you. You have to do this one. You have to do this one." And he does it, but she goes on fire. And even Sydney and Gail are kind of like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Yeah. Well, and the whole thing about, she keeps talking about how they need to pass the torch. And so what do? They literally light her on fire. Oh my God.
That torch.
I just love the way that all this plays out. And I think that this is where the stuff, I know that I've seen people talk about it. It's a little controversial on the Billy Loomis of it all, because Loomis is kind of hanging over the end of this movie where he's kind of showing up in mirrors and these things where he's really pushing Sam to embrace that side of her, which again, it's not actually like she's being haunted. It's that this is what she's seen because of her psychosis, because she is broken. Like that's the point of this character. She's very broken. She's got she even talks about it. She has hallucinations. So she's hallucinating it. But him pointing her in the right direction in the hallucinations during all this is kind of great.
Yes.
And it actually works for me because I really believe that at the end of the day, she was so scared of running from it. Her hallucinations, like, just embrace it this one time and it will save your life and it'll save your sister. And you guys are going to get out of here alive.
Exactly. And it's a more, I mean, everybody wants their father not to be the bad guy. No one wants their father to be Darth Vader. No one wants their father to be Billy Loomis. But like she can use that and be like, use her own memories, not even memories, use her own like visions of, and it's a best case scenario version of Billy Loomis, but you use it and turn it to something good for yourself. You use your tragic background and it makes you strong enough to do what needs to be done, to survive, to help protect your sister, to move on, and to get past these psychopaths.
And it works.
It does. It does.
It works so well. And I love it for it because, again, it feels like a way to also put the Billy Loomis character to bed in a weird way.
Yeah.
But I like that they really took a chance. And again, it feels like a little bit of Rise of Skywalker. No one wants their dad to be Palpatine.
Right. That's right.
Or a clone of Palpatine. But, whatever it is. No one wants to be related to Palpatine, but you're going to make the best of it, and you're going to find a way to move forward in your life. You're not going to move backwards.
100%.
And that's what I really love. So this leads to this scene at the end, very reminiscent of the first one. Everyone's being brought out on stretchers who's survived. The reporters are showing up. They're beginning to report on the murders. And we have this great moment. And this is what I really like, is that we actually spend time first a little bit more with Gail and Sydney, because you're kind of ending their story, and then Sam walks over to them.
Right.
And she has this conversation about, is this going to get better? Am I going to be okay? And her, after the confrontation and being so hard on them, to be like, I actually want your advice. Thank you guys for coming through. Thank you for staying. You didn't have to do that.
Right.
I'm in your debt, but am I going to be okay? Because I'm the daughter of Billy Loomis, and I know this has been, she'd already told Sid, this is weird for you, I'm sure, but what does this mean? Am I going to be okay? And it's like, yeah, I am. And then what are you going to do next? Gail, I'm not going to write about it.
Right. And that's what we were talking about before, where this actually feels like it could be an ending. And I feel like that, like I said, that was done purposely. Probably, you never knew what was going to happen, whether this was going to be the one and done. This is a film that if we never get a Scream 6, it's a very proper ending. But it does leave it open enough that we could definitely get some more sequels. Now, we talked off air, and I'll let you bring it up now, that you think this is the last time we're seeing Sydney, either way.
I think this is for sure the last time we're seeing Sydney, just because I think now, especially that it's been introduced that she's married, she's got the kid, she showed up, but she was putting this all behind her. And I think by coming full circle, this is the best way to leave that, is that her first appearance is in Woodsboro. Her last appearance should be in Woodsboro.
Right.
The last time should be, once again, at where it all started. Leave it there, bury it. It's over. It's gone. It's done.
Right.
Gail is the one I think you can arguably still bring back, and I'm sure that she, of all the legacy characters, makes the most sense.
Right.
But I think this is where Sydney rests. I think Sydney finally gets the happy ending, and I think it's the ending she deserves. I know that there's a lot of people who think that she should die or she should ultimately become one of the Ghostface. I don't think I would love it if we finally just got this point. It's, you know why? Because it's the thing that I've talked about with Halloween 2018 that drives me nuts is I hate that it stunted Laurie so much that I feel like Laurie never got to be a person. I don't want. Well, she lived in that fear. Like
yeah, I get.
You know what I mean? Like enough that her life was broken, things never moved forward. She lost her daughter's relationship. You know, all the stuff with 2018. I like the movie, but I think that there were story choices that don't always work.
I know this is neither here, and then we're gonna have a Halloween podcast at some point. I just don't want to say that my argument against that is like I am all about what you're saying as far as Sydney goes. For Jamie Lee and Halloween, I want her to end up. I actually want her and Michael to die together. That's what I want.
That's totally fine. And if that's where we get, that's great. Right. But I'm more talking about in the moment of like these scenarios. I want to see someone actually get a happy ending in this. I'm not saying that Jamie Lee's Laurie needs to have a happy ending because we still have one more movie.
Yep.
But I'm more saying that ultimately I want someone in a horror franchise to get a happy ending in this way. Like, we don't see someone live through 5 movies normally.
That's actually one of the things I'm talking about. That's the one thing I do want to mention. Like, this has the chance, and I hate to sound blasphematic, but this puts Sidney Prescott up there with Jamie Lee Curtis. With Laurie Strode. Laurie Strode is the final girl. She's the epitome of final girl. I don't know if Sidney Prescott doesn't eventually overtake her, especially if it does. She does. If Jamie Lee does die in Halloween Ends.
I mean, if Jamie Lee does die at the end of Halloween Ends, you almost have to say she's the GOAT final girl because she goes out against him in the end.
Yeah, depending on how it's done. But,
depending on how it's done.
But I think Sydney girl overall means is the one who survives, and if Sydney's the one who does survive the franchise. And she survives by being 5 movies. All of the whole franchise includes her. Like Jamie Lee took some time off in the Halloween franchise. And
died once in the franchise already.
She did die once in the franchise already. That's true. And the one movie that we shall not talk about, even though we'll have an hour-long podcast about it. And oh God, Buster Rhymes. Okay. I'm already having nightmares.
Treat, motherfucker.
You're giving me nightmares. I'm actually having like full shock nightmares now. But. Going back to it, I agree. Like, this is what it gives. It does give Sydney a very happy ending. I have the feeling that the filmmakers, as much as I respect them, I think they do a great job with Ready or Not. I think they did a great job with this movie. And it might be the studio's fault. I think I'll blame it on the studio more than on the filmmakers. I have the feeling that Scream 5 was so successful that they're going to bring the Scream 6 to the forefront. And the studio's going to be like, well, you can't have a Scream without Sydney Prescott. She's alive. You have to have Sydney Prescott in it. I think she should stay out of it. I think this is good to have her in her. I think we should have, if we have any legacy characters from now on, you bring back Gail as a Gail in a Yoda moment, maybe. Yep. But you already have your Minx, you have your Randy's niece as a person. You can become that new Focus in a way, not much of a legacy character. You bring back Kirby like you set up in Scream 4. That's the way you do it. There's ways you can do it without resorting to fucking up with Sydney's ending.
No, and I think that's what it has to be ultimately. Exactly. I really do. I think, and that's again assuming that we're getting a 6. I think at this point it's at least 95% positive we have to be getting a 6.
Yeah.
But whatever comes next, I really think, especially because of how this movie is really being sold as a, first movie, not also a last movie.
Yeah.
It almost would be best to let her go out like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just let her be.
Yeah.
Because I think again, whatever comes next is going to be great, but it needs to be able to stand on its own. Like, you aren't going to need everyone to come back.
Right.
We have a couple of really great characters left at the very end of this. And that's the other thing is, like, Scream ended with the trio being alive. This movie ends with Neve still being alive, Courtney still being alive, Melissa still being alive, Jenna still being alive, Jasmine still being alive, and Mason still being alive.
Yeah, there's
Actors,
still a
not the
lot.
characters.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people left to deal with at this point.
You don't need Sydney.
No, you don't. I kind of like that.
And that's not to say I don't want to see Sydney again. I mean, I would love to see Sydney again if you have the right story, but I don't need to see Sydney again.
Exactly. She's got her happy ending, and that's actually what I'm going to say, because I think I would watch a Scream 6. If Scream 6 did happen, I would watch and go, it feels weird not having Sidney Prescott here.
Right.
So I mean, it's a little hypocritical in a way that I want her to have her happy ending. And if they do find a way to bring her back and still not invalidate what happened here, let's do it. In a way, though, I think what they got to do is you got to bring Mark back into it as well at that point. I feel like
that I agree. If you do it, you have to have Patrick Dempsey back as well.
Right, because then it makes more sense to add on to that legacy that way as well. Let's do it. Let's fucking do it. So, well, I think that will bring our Scream review to a close. I'm very excited to have done this with you, PJ. Thank you so much for being my buddy and being my podcast mate and going through these films that you love as much as I do. I would rather, I'd rather do it than.
I agree with you. There's no one else I'd rather be doing this with right now. I'm glad that we just got to talk about the new Scream movie for over 2 hours because I have a lot to talk about, and I could still talk about it. That's the thing. Sure, I could keep talking about this movie and all the stuff it did, but eventually all good things must come to an end, so we can't continue to beat the drum, but I think there's a couple things we do need to do to wrap this thing up, though.
We do. We need to do the ratings. We need to rank them and do everything else. So we have, at the end of the day, I'm going to break through what we had. Scream, I retroactively rated it 11 after giving it a 10.5 the first time. PJ,
like a psychopath.
Like a psychopath. Scream 2, I gave it a 6.5. PJ, you gave it a 7.5 for an average of 7. Scream 3, I gave a 4.5. You gave a 5.5 to an average of 5. Scream 4, I gave an 8.5, and you gave a 10 for an average of 9.25. Which means, what is your numerical rating from 1 to 11, because we always turn it up to 11 here at PLD Projects and Two Mediocre White Dudes. Where do you put Scream 5 out of 11?
All right. So it's really tough. And I've been thinking about this a lot. It's been weighing on me. We've talked a lot. Before we got on here, we were both talking about we didn't know where our rankings were going to end up and exactly where we were going to rate the movie. Having sat on it, having thought about it, having just gone through this conversation again, this movie sits at a firm 9.5.
9.5. Okay, so that means at the end of the day that PJ Campbell's rankings
officially
are Scream 1, Scream 4, Scream 5, Scream 2, Scream 3. So now where do I fall?
What did I rate Scream 4 again?
Scream 4, you gave it a 10.
Interesting. So I'm about to do something.
Oh, we're switching it up? Okay.
I'm going to retroactively bring Scream 4 down to a 9.5 also.
Okay.
And the reason I'm doing this is because I cannot for the life of me find a way to rank this it's almost at a 10, but they're so level in filmmaking, in story, in character for me. They have to be tied in my rankings, and I cannot find a way to do it other than I think there's a little bit I can shave off of Scream 4. It's the Mark Kincaid of it all that will bring it down to the 9.5.
Okay.
We're going to be tied.
So you're going to let yourself have a tie.
I am.
And because it's kind of hard to have a tie. You can still say 9.5, but still if you have to place them, you're just going to put them next to each other. That's what you're doing. So it's Scream 5, Scream, then Scream 4, 5.
Yeah.
Scream 2, Scream 3. Okay. That makes my rankings even scarier. Because I'll be honest with you, I let you go first, and part of it's because I'm trying to figure out where I want to put it still. And I'm still.
It's hard, isn't it?
It is very hard. I have the same thoughts as you. Obviously, Scream 3 is by far the worst. Scream 2 has dipped below Scream 4 for me. Scream 1 is definitely the greatest of the bunch. It's the most perfect movie. It's never going to be reached by Scream ever again.
Never. There's never going to be a movie in the Scream franchise that reaches the original.
And that's because just for lack of a better word, novelty's sake, it's new. It's all new and exciting. There's nothing new and as exciting in the Scream franchise. You could have new pieces, but nothing that's overall new. So that leads me. I went back and forth a couple of times. Do I like Scream 4 better? Do I like Scream 5 better? Do I like Scream 4 better? Do I like Scream 5 better? I think Scream 4 had more consistency for me to a degree, if that makes sense.
Totally fair.
But Scream 5 had such great moments for me.
Yes.
So there's some like the greater. I think Scream 5's deaths were better overall, minus the guts in Scream 4. And I love the Dewey death so much. And I love the emotional weight there. There's not as much emotional weight in Scream 4 as there is in Scream 5. Because the big three kind of make it through again, and it's still kind of like everybody else dying, and it's like,
right.
I get it, so I get that. So the emotional weight's not quite as there. Although, I gotta say, Kirby, I like Kirby better than almost any character in Scream 5. Maybe Randy's niece. I could say that Randy's niece does hit that. Jasmine does hit that. Mindy does hit that note as Kirby. I think I'm going to give it to 5 though as well. I think I'm going to give it to 5. I'm not even going to make it a tie. I'm going to cut through it, rip the Band-Aid off. I'm not going to give it I'm going to give Scream 5 a solid 9.
All right.
So it's 0.5 higher than Scream 4. And the reason why I can do that, despite the Kirbiness of it all, is Scream 5 allowed Kirby to live. So it gives me a bonus.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's the same thing that we did about Scream 2, where it's the fact that you killed Randy that has really been your like Achilles heel of a movie.
Right.
Which is why Scream 4 is the better movie ultimately overall, just in general.
Right.
Because look, it didn't kill Randy.
Right? It didn't kill Randy. So at the end of the day, this franchise out of 11, if you combine all of our rankings and average them all out, is an 8 out of 11 franchise.
It's not bad.
That's not bad at all. You have it a little higher. You have it as 8.375. I have it a little lower, as 7.625. And my Scream 3 ranking really tanked it, I think.
Yeah, Scream 3 really wrecked the curve there.
Really did. But overall, that's not a bad sequence, and I like to keep that in mind as we go forward in franchises. We'll bring that back up and see where we rank them. And I think we'll keep the ranking ongoing as we go through these franchises, horror or not. We're just going to do it because we love it anyway.
I think the fascinating thing about this is actually it just shows how consistently overall this franchise has been over 5 films, and that makes it special. I can't think of a lot of horror franchises where I can point at it and go, there's 5 really good to great entries.
No matter how much we love them. I agree with 200%. You're looking at the Halloween franchise, it's like...
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the Halloween franchise, there's a lot more bad than good. The good is great a lot of the time, but for the most part, like, same thing with Friday the 13th. Yeah. There's some rough go.
Yeah.
I have the best time watching them. Like, it's not a bad thing, but it's really impressive. And I got to say, before we get out of here, to Bettolini, Olpen, and Gillette, and everyone behind the scenes, James Vanderbilt, Guy Busick, to having, the EP of Kevin Williamson, who really didn't write it this time. Right. He said he's never not writing another one. He's giving it to a new generation. To be the first movie not written by Williamson and Kruger.
Right.
To be the first film not directed by Wes Craven.
Right.
I'd be hard-pressed to believe that they were not more fully involved. And that's one of the most impressive things I can say about it.
And that's one of the best compliments you can give it. Because if they weren't as involved as they probably, as they're kind of, it looks like they were, but it feels like they were, then that's you're capturing what you want to capture out of the franchise. Just to bring back one thing I do want to say, in terms of franchises go, Scream does only have 5 entries in comparison to the Halloween Friday. So if we put up,
that just makes the consistency.
if we put up, I mentioned maybe when we go through this to put up like the first 5 Halloweens or the first 5 entries and see where we rate overall comparatively. That's an interesting discussion to be had, I think, at some point potentially. But
I think so too. But
so,
there's more to break down. I just think it's really.
But it is good. It is definitely.
Scream is great, man.
100%.
I feel bad that I raged so hard against parts of 2 and 3 in our initial podcast. I feel like people think that I'm probably a lot more harsh than I really am. But man, at the end of the day, for all the problems, for everything, I love this franchise, like warts and all, because I love Ghostface, I love Neve, I love Courtney, I love everyone, really. David Arquette,
right?
It doesn't matter who it is. Jack Quaid now, Melissa Barrera, Timothy Oliphant. Don't particularly love the character, but I love him.
Yeah,
like there's so many great people. So many great performances, so many great kills, so many memorable lines, so many just great stage sequences. Everything about Scream continues to be great because there's only 5 of these movies, so the sample size is smaller, but it means it's more consistently interesting. Mm-hmm. It means every time it comes back, it's been sharp, it's been vicious, it's been fun. We've laughed, we've cried, we've had a good time. That's special.
100%.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how hard we were on stuff. This franchise is special. And I think that's my biggest takeaway is that I can't think of many franchises with 5 movies that are this consistently great.
Yeah, that's a good call.
In this way.
Good call.
And that even when we are hard on it, I still ultimately like the movie. Yeah. And I'll still have a good time watching it.
100%.
Scream rocks, man. This franchise is great.
Now, it's funny you mentioned the word consistency because I want to bring up something now that is a little bit of a segue.
Oh, no.
This podcast was built on we dropped 4 episodes right away. And boom, we got 4 right away leading up to Scream because, it's funny.
I'm sorry that all of you listened to that.
This is my first actual audio podcast. And one of the things I read was that a lot of people like to drop a lot of content early in order to kind of get some content out there as part of the library. My initial plans for this podcast was to kind of burst
this franchise, huh?
This franchise,
wow.
Our franchise.
You're really you think really highly of 2 mediocre white dudes.
2 mediocre white dudes has the most consistent 5 episodes of all time. So we're going places. Let's put it that way.
So we're not as mediocre as we let on.
Exactly.
Perfect.
I had this idea where we're going to drop these and then we're going to I have another podcast launching called The Crown Jewels, which is me taking everybody through Queen. And I was going to debut that at the end of January. But on air right now in discussions, I want to talk to PJ about this and hopefully we can come to something. I don't want to wait as long as I initially had planned. I initially planned our next franchise to start in like the middle of February we were going to start watching them and recording them and giving myself time to edit and things like that. But, I don't think I need as much time to edit it as I thought I did.
No, because we are true professionals who record to tape.
Exactly. We record to tape, and I can just cut out things really quickly. So we are next week actually scheduled to start recording our next podcast. So I think I'm going to start airing them sooner than I initially planned. I don't have a date I don't have a date in mind yet, but next week.
Fucking dare you. Fucking dare you.
Fucking dare you. That's like Tom Cruise in a way. Wow, Tom Cruise. Like, yeah. Gotta get really intense and needs this to happen. If you don't release the podcast, the world is going to die.
That was beautiful, actually.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I don't normally go in on impersonations, but that was nice.
You just got the intensity, the love, the feel.
It really worked. I really felt if you don't release this podcast, I will go scorched earth on you, motherfucker. Yeah, a little Tropic Thunder for you.
Tropic Thunder reference. That's good. That's perfect for us as well. So
yeah, it is.
Well, we'll announce it now. I think we might have mentioned it before. Might not. I can't remember if we actually said it on air or not, but we are.
I don't think we did.
Okay. Then the next franchise we're going to cover is the Conjuring franchise. No Conjuring movie coming out that we know of at this time, but we decided we want to go through this entire Conjuring universe. It's going to take a little time. There are quite a few movies in this franchise. There's at least, 12, I think? 13? 13. There are 13 episodes coming your way where we're going to break down all of the Conjuring movies.
Wait, there's not 13 Conjuring movies.
No, you know what it is? It'll be the 13th episode of Two Mediocre White Dudes.
Oh, I was like,
I realized when I said
I'm not great at math. I was like, I'm not great at math, but there's 3 Conjuring movies, 3 Annabelle movies, and The Nun. That's 7 plus La Llorona makes 8.
I realized what I was saying and how it sounded like this is going to come across the wrong way. No.
Yeah, I was about to smash that fucking mustache off of your face because I was like, dude, look, I know that we're mediocre white dudes, but you cannot make us look like you did not do math. Like, you have to be able to do basic addition.
Two Mediocre White Dudes, episodes 6 through 13 will be the Conjuring franchise. And we are, as PJ mentioned, we are, despite the studio saying otherwise, we are definitely including the Curse of La Llorona in there.
The Curse of La Llorona, get it right, mediocre white
Curse
man.
of La Llorona. I just see that title and I can't help but say, like, just.
I you know what? This is the first time I've ever saying this, but I don't claim you. I'm no longer white. I am albino Cambodian.
And that's where we shall end this. All right, so Two Mediocre White Dudes will be coming back to you sooner rather than later. I don't have an exact date for you, but we're going to record next week. We'll do the Conjuring franchise. I'm going to actually make an off-the-cuff announcement here as well.
Oh, no.
We talked about this. PJ and I, we did minorly talk about this, but we didn't actually go for an only podcast that I wanted to do, one of the podcasts I've been threatening to do for my entire life, and never had come to be yet, is the Harris.
Yep. Well,
and I couldn't figure out the perfect way to do it because I didn't want to do it solo because I didn't know what avenue I want to take. And I decided that, you know what? I'm going to bring PJ into this.
Oh, God damn it.
PJ is now going to be my accomplice. And I'm not going to have a separate Harris podcast. It's going to be the Two Mediocre White Dudes on the Harris. But that's not all. I know you're excited. I know everybody's excited. Everybody's like,
people are booing us right now. I hope you know that. The listener is booing us.
But here's the best part about it for PJ and for me. We're not going to do the Harris as one long thing, as one long project. It's not going to be 70 episodes in a row of the Harris. We're not doing that.
I would actually have to like quit.
I know you would. Which is why I wouldn't do it.
I would.
We are going to do franchises like this: Conjuring, Scream, eventually Halloween, dealing with what we've announced so far. But in between franchises, you're going to have 2 episodes here and there where we cover the Harris, and we're going to do another filmography.
This is the filmography I've waited my whole life to ever do anything on. If anyone knows me well enough, especially people who watch the Schmodown, like the Schmodown faithful, have figured it out. A lot of the competitors have figured it out. Bruce Campbell, motherfuckers.
Bruce.
Oh yeah, Bruce Campbell's happening. I've been waiting my whole life. I look. There's no one I'm better suited to do an entire podcast about than Bruce Campbell. It's just not possible.
Let's be honest, PJ. We're doing deals with the devil. I wanted Harris. You want Bruce Campbell. We'll do it for each other in order to get our product out there.
That is exactly why this is happening. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. There's going to be a lot of, because the Schmodown season is starting, and so the thing is PLD and I are going to be sitting on call a lot, just working. So that's where a lot of this is coming from, to be honest, is that we just spend a lot of time sitting on call. And we've also teased talked about potentially doing a podcast called The Writer's Room, where it would literally be you sitting in, listening to us doing random stuff while we're working. And Two Mediocre White Dudes in a Blue Box is a very real conversation behind the scenes of a thing that we might do. And I don't want to say more than that, but if you know, you know.
If you know.
What could 2 mediocre white men in a blue box mean? I hope that you guys like being British.
Are we idiots? We might be idiots as well.
Idiots abroad. Oh wait, that's taken.
Well, all I gotta say is maybe pack your fez, maybe pack your scarf.
Yeah,
grab some
jelly babies. Yeah, see, hey, look at us. There we go. Familiarize yourself with Eric Roberts' filmography. in 1996 specifically. I there's no reason that we wouldn't be talking about that. You know, I'm excited though. If we do that, there's a lot to talk about because I love myself a blue box that flies around space and time.
I love it. I love it. Here we are making these announcements. Here we are. But
I wasn't anticipating any of this.
We just kind of threw it out there, and we're going to keep it because fuck it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That's PJ Campbell. I am PLD. This has been Two Mediocre White Dudes on a Film, the Scream watch through. We're moving on next to The Conjuring. Till next time, stay mediocre, everybody.
Be as mediocre as possible, guys. Don't ever underestimate yourselves in being great, in the power that you may be given. Stay mediocre. Stay strong. Stay mediocre.